The morning of August 2013, shrouded in mist, began with an unusual disturbance on the logging road NF 5510 at the edge of Falls City, Washington. 6 unmarked police vehicles quietly pulled up in front of a small wooden cabin hidden deep in the thick pine forest, where fog lingered and the ground was still soaked from the previous night's rain. A few residents along the Snoqualmie Valley watched from behind their windows as tactical-clad officers fanned out around the area. Inside the cabin, 62-year-old Caleb Rourke was pouring water into a kettle, a habit he had repeated every morning for nearly 20 years of solitary life. Once a quiet, reserved forester who rarely left his property. A loud knock echoed at 5:12 a.m. Caleb Rourke, King County Sheriff's Office. "We have a warrant for your arrest in connection with the 1995 Mercer disappearance." One officer later recounted that Rourke's hand trembled slightly as he set the kettle down. But his gaze remained strangely calm, as if he had been waiting for this moment for 18 years. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. On the morning of August 20th, 1995, in North Bend, Washington, the weather was cool and blanketed in thicker than usual fog, the kind of lingering dampness that spread across the Cascades in late summer. On the outskirts of town, where narrow roads wound through pine forests, daily life typically only stirred when workers, delivery drivers, and local families began their day. Against that familiar quiet backdrop, 38-year-old Daniel Mercer, owner of Mercer Hauling Transport Service, was preparing for a short delivery run to Falls City. To his regular customers, Daniel was a reserved, hard-working man who was especially meticulous with his schedule. Accompanying him that day was 24-year-old Rafael Torres, a reliable employee well familiar with the hilly routes around King County. In the truck cab was also Daniel's 9-year-old daughter, Emily Mercer. Anyone who had met the little girl knew Emily was a sweet child, deeply attached to her father and often joining him on weekend deliveries when no one was available to watch her. At around 10:28 a.m., the three stopped at the North Bend gas station to refuel and buy drinks. The clerk later stated that Emily entered the store first, Rafael used the payphone outside, and Daniel stood near the front of the truck reviewing delivery paperwork. No one noticed anything unusual in their behavior. Everything seemed so normal that no one imagined it would be the last time Mercer Hauling would be seen on the road that day. After leaving the gas station, the white truck headed toward the road leading to Falls City, but from that point onward, it never appeared on any stretch of road, store, or intersection along the planned route. By afternoon, Kayla Monroe, Daniel's girlfriend, began to sense something was wrong when he didn't return on time. She called him multiple times, but only heard prolonged ringing followed by silence. At the same time, Linda Gray, Emily's biological mother, was waiting for her daughter to come home as arranged between the two families, but Daniel's phone was completely unreachable. By around 11 p.m., both women were worried enough to contact Helen Mercer, Daniel's mother. The three met on Daniel's front porch, where the kitchen light was still on, the house was locked, and there were no signs anyone had returned since morning. Daniel's phone remained off, Emily was not at her mother's house as usual, and Rafael had not reported for his shift as expected. All these factors combined raised an alarm that could not be ignored. At 11:45 p.m. on August 20th, 1995, after every attempt at contact failed and anxiety had turned into clear fear, Daniel Mercer's family officially called the King County Sheriff's Office to report the simultaneous disappearance of Daniel Mercer, his daughter Emily Mercer, and Rafael Torres. Just minutes after the near-midnight missing persons call, the on-duty unit at the King County Sheriff's Office immediately dispatched a patrol team to Daniel Mercer's home in North Bend to verify the initial information. Upon arrival, the officers noted the house was dark and silent, with only the kitchen light still on from the afternoon, the front door normally locked, and no signs of forced entry or any struggle inside. A quick check of the yard and garage revealed the Mercer hauling truck was missing, while Daniel's personal vehicle remained in the garage, further confirming he had left that morning in the truck. Kayla Monroe told police that Daniel had not taken any personal items, suggesting a long trip no extra clothes, no cash withdrawal, no packed documents. Linda Gray also confirmed Emily had not brought clothes, sleepwear, or necessary personal items, aside from the small cloth doll she always carried everywhere. Rafael Torres, according to co-workers, had no plans to leave his job or the town. He was scheduled for the following week's shifts and had accepted a new order for Monday. These details led investigators to rule out the scenario of the group voluntarily leaving town for an extended period without notifying family or acquaintances. After completing the home scene check, police filed a report documenting 3 simultaneous missing persons cases, initially classified as missing persons. High concern due to the involvement of a minor. Another team was sent to the North Bend gas station at dawn to verify the clerk's statement. From security footage and transaction logs, police confirmed the trio's presence at 10:28 a.m., along with the direction the truck took after refueling. This data became the last verified timestamp. The drive from Daniel's home to Falls City took only about 10 minutes, so police immediately narrowed the search to the expected route from the gas station along SE North Bend Way, merging onto State Route 202, then turning toward Falls City. Investigators used traffic maps to mark all potential stop or incident points, including side roads, empty lots, areas frequented by trucks, and intersections leading to forestry roads in the Snoqualmie Forest. During the initial nighttime sweep, police found no sign of the Mercer hauling truck on the main route, nor any evidence of an accident such as debris, skid marks, or reports from locals. Based on the limited information from those first hours, an official report was filed, noting the 3 simultaneous disappearances, the last movement ending at the gas station, and no further data from that point onward. The entire file was transferred to the investigative unit the next morning to begin expanding the scope, with the goal of locating the truck's final position and identifying the exact road segment where the 3 had deviated from the main route to Falls City. As soon as the investigative unit took over the case early on the morning of August 21, 1995, the first priority was to fully verify the Mercer hauling truck's planned route from the North Bend gas station to Falls City, aiming to determine whether the 3 victims had deviated from the usual commercial roadway. A team of officers was assigned to drive the main route exactly as Daniel typically took for nearby deliveries, starting from the gas station, crossing SE North Bend Way, merging onto State Route 202, and continuing to Central Falls City. During the sweep, they stopped at every possible rest or stop location, roadside pull-offs, small truck stops, the parking lot of a repair shop near the Snoqualmie Bridge, the entrance to one of the side branches of Route 202, and intersections leading to forestry roads branching off the edge of Snoqualmie Forest. At each spot, they closely examined the road surface for tire tracks, unusual skid marks, or any debris that might indicate a traffic incident, while also approaching businesses along the route to ask if anyone had seen Daniel's distinctive white truck the previous morning. However, all efforts yielded nothing. No one had seen a truck matching the description, and cameras at 2 stores on the main artery recorded no matching images after the trio left the gas station. The officer tasked with reviewing topographic maps marked the points the truck would have had to pass if Daniel followed the registered commercial route with the local transport system, including the narrow section where traffic often slowed during peak hours. At every such location, the team confirmed no evidence of the truck stopping, no reports of unusual traffic or complaints from residents, and no emergency calls related to an oversized vehicle throughout August 20th. To ensure nothing was missed, police visited 3 additional small gas stations scattered along Route 202 to check fuel logs and question morning shift staff, all with negative results. Preliminary analysis led investigators to conclude that if the truck had truly traveled from North Bend to Falls City after leaving the gas station, it would certainly have passed at least 2 major intersections and several narrow stretches with considerable weekend midday traffic, and the chance of no one noticing a vehicle of Mercer hauling's size and load was virtually zero. While checking potential stop points, the team also reviewed locations with traffic cameras managed by county authorities, though the 1995 storage system was limited. Those cameras operated intermittently and did not cover the entire roadway, but investigators extracted all remaining footage from August 20th. No matching vehicle appeared in any recording between approximately 10:40 a.m. and early afternoon. This led to a critical hypothesis. The three victims never entered the commercial roadway to Falls City. Additionally, another team of officers re-interviewed Daniel's client. The customer confirmed Daniel neither contacted them nor stopped by the facility all day. The client also noted Daniel had no habit of changing routes at the last minute, especially for a simple Sunday delivery. Data from Raphael's workplace indicated he had reported no personal plans that would affect the delivery schedule. All collected details further reinforced the conclusion that the three did not follow the usual route, and their disappearance occurred within just minutes of leaving the North Bend gas station. The investigative team noted in the end-of-day report that the North Bend to Falls City route was completely devoid of any evidence related to the truck or the three victims, and that nothing suggested they had appeared on that roadway even briefly. With the full route verification failing, police temporarily ruled out the possibility of an accident or stop on the main highway, while concluding that the truck had turned off in a different direction immediately after the gas station, making tracing their path far more complicated than initially anticipated. Immediately after concluding that the Mercer hauling truck did not follow the commercial route to Falls City, the investigation team shifted its focus to collecting witness statements at the last location where the three victims were seen, the North Bend gas station. This was the only site that retained verifiable data confirming the presence of Daniel, Emily, and Raphael on the morning of August 20th, 1995. The investigation team returned to the gas station at noon on August 21st to interview all employees who had been on duty between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. the previous day, including the store manager. The cashier, who had directly seen the three victims, was questioned in detail about activity at the station when the Mercer hauling truck stopped there. He clearly described that the truck pulled up to pump number 3 around 10:28 a.m. Daniel stood near the front of the truck reviewing delivery paperwork. Raphael used the payphone next to the automatic car wash, and Emily went into the store to pick out sodas. When asked about anything unusual, the employee stated that a man had appeared in the fuel pump area, standing close to where Daniel was pumping gas. The man was heavy-set, in his early 40s, wearing a dark flannel jacket and an old baseball cap, with an unremarkable appearance, but he seemed to watch the truck as it left. The gas station employee recalled that Daniel had turned to say a few words to the man, not a long conversation, but clearly an interaction. When asked to describe him further, the employee said the man was not a regular customer at the station, and he neither pumped gas nor entered the store. He simply stood near pump number 3 for a few minutes before walking away toward the rear parking lot. Another witness, the driver of a pickup truck that had stopped at the station during the same time frame, also stated that he saw an older dark green pickup parked in the far corner of the lot, 2 rows away from Daniel's position. The vehicle had no front license plate and visible scratches on the hood. The driver was not certain it was connected to Daniel, but remembered that the pickup left the lot just a few dozen seconds after the Mercer hauling truck departed and headed in the same direction toward the main road. The investigation team reviewed the station's security camera footage again, though the 1995 system only captured low-resolution images from a single angle. The camera clearly showed Daniel's truck arriving and leaving the station, but did not capture the license plate of any other vehicle in the parking area. However, the blurry footage did record a dark-colored pickup during the time frame matching the 2 witnesses' accounts, positioned at the edge of the pump area, though it was impossible to identify the driver or vehicle details. The investigation team immediately had the gas station employee and the pickup driver sign their statements, while noting in the case file that the appearance of the unknown man and the dark green pickup were leads to follow up on, but with no conclusive level of connection yet established. They also questioned other station employees, including the checkout clerk and convenience store staff, but no one had noticed the man or any suspicious vehicle. This could be attributed to the busy morning rush hour, when customer traffic was heavy, and it was difficult for anyone to remember every unfamiliar face. After completing the witness interviews, police compiled all the data and determined that no witness had seen Daniel, Raphael, or Emily after the moment the truck left the gas station. There were no reports of them stopping anywhere else immediately afterward. No one saw them on the road segment leading from the station to Route 202, and no cameras recorded the truck appearing at subsequent intersections. The team's end-of-day report confirmed that the last location with direct evidence of the three victims' presence was entirely within the North Bend gas station premises. This became the final timestamp of the disappearance and the sole starting point for all subsequent investigative developments. Immediately after confirming that the North Bend gas station was the last recorded sighting of Daniel Mercer, Emily Mercer, and Raphael Torres, the investigation unit held an internal meeting to establish the next lines of inquiry to explain how the Mercer hauling truck vanished just minutes after leaving the station. In the initial phase, the team outlined three plausible directions based on the data collected. The first was the possibility of an accident on the main route from the gas station to Route 202 and then to Falls City. This was the most common scenario in vehicle-related disappearances, especially in an area with moderate weekend traffic like North Bend. To investigate this direction, police reswept the entire previously searched route while coordinating with the King County Traffic Patrol Unit to cross-check accident reports, disabled vehicle reports, or citizen complaints from 10:30 a.m. to noon on August 20th. There was no indication the truck had been involved in an accident. No unusual skid marks, no scattered plastic or metal debris, no tire tracks veering off the shoulder, and no reports from residents about a vehicle parked motionless on the roadside. The limited 1995 traffic camera system provided little help, but surviving footage showed no sign of Daniel's truck at major intersections. After more than 4 hours of additional sweeping, the team agreed to rule out an accident on the main road, as a serious incident would certainly have left physical traces or been witnessed. The second direction considered was the possibility that Daniel had voluntarily left the area with his daughter and Raphael. Some past disappearances had involved individuals abruptly changing plans and leaving town due to personal reasons, debts, or family conflicts. Police checked Daniel's bank accounts and card transactions at the gas station, noting that he had not withdrawn cash, purchased supplies for a long trip, or taken personal belongings. At home, no suitcases were missing. No clothing had been removed, and all important documents, business records, and company ledgers remained intact in the cabinet. Raphael Torres also showed no signs of preparing to leave town. He had left all his personal items in his rented room, paid rent on schedule, and laid out his work uniform for the following week. Police called Raphael's family in Yakima to ask if he had mentioned any plans to go anywhere, and all responses were negative. Neither Daniel nor Raphael had any clear motive to flee, while Emily, as a young child, could not have made a voluntary decision to disappear. The evidence realistically showed that the scenario of all three intentionally vanishing did not align with any collected facts. Thus, this direction was deemed highly unlikely. The third, and most complex direction, involved the possibility that the truck turned onto one of the forestry road systems branching off from the edge of Snoqualmie Forest, just a few miles from the gas station. Logging roads in this area formed a complex network of dirt tracks, primarily used by logging companies, stretching dozens of miles across hillsides. Some branches were abandoned, while others remained in use, but saw very little traffic. These logging roads were difficult to observe from the main highway, lacked clear signage, and had no surveillance cameras. If a vehicle turned onto one, it would generally go unnoticed by anyone on the commercial route. The investigation team compared topographic maps with the disappearance timeline and realized that if Daniel left the gas station at 10:28 a.m. and turned onto any logging road within 2-3 minutes, the truck's failure to appear on Route 202 was entirely plausible. Upon deeper analysis, police noted a key detail: witnesses at the gas station had seen an unknown man and a dark green pickup leave the lot just dozens of seconds after the Mercer hauling truck. The team considered the possibility that this suspicious vehicle may have followed Daniel's truck into the logging road area, though no confirming evidence existed yet. During discussions, what tilted the team toward the logging road direction was not only the terrain's concealment potential, but also the fact that the first two directions, accident on the main road and voluntary departure, did not hold up against the actual evidence. In the end-of-day report, the investigation team agreed there was sufficient basis to temporarily eliminate directions 1 and 2, while prioritizing deployment of search resources to the logging road system, viewing it as the most viable direction for locating the truck or any trace of Daniel, Emily, and Raphael after leaving the North Bend gas station. Immediately after the investigation team decided to prioritize the logging road direction, search forces were deployed to Forestry Road NF 5510 on the morning of August 22, 1995, when Snoqualmie Forest was still shrouded in thick fog, and sunlight had not yet penetrated the tall pine canopy along the road. NF 5510 was one of the largest logging roads branching off near the North Bend residential area, just minutes by car from the gas station, with a mostly degraded dirt surface that had been used by logging trucks years earlier. The search team consisted of 6 King County rescue personnel, a K-9 unit, and 3 investigating officers, divided into small groups for a systematic approach. Initially, they created a preliminary search map based on paper topographic maps, old forestry department documents, and records from logging companies that had operated in the area. Groups marked sections accessible by vehicle and branches requiring foot travel. The first focus was the area near the entrance, where Daniel's truck might have turned in. The search plan was divided into 3 layers. The first was scanning the main stretch of NF 5510 within 2 kilometers of the entrance. The second was checking natural clearings or widened areas along the route where a truck might have stopped. The third was sweeping the forest edge adjacent to the road in case the vehicle or victims had left the main surface. The K-9 unit was deployed first to scent along the road edges, while rescue personnel followed to mark covered areas. They examined the road surface for fresh tire tracks, skid marks, or footprints, but near the entrance, the soft dirt had been churned by local vehicles, making it nearly impossible to distinguish new from old traces. Meanwhile, the mapping group noted all side branches of NF 5510, some of which were blocked by fallen trees or rock slides, indicating the forest road system was no longer regularly maintained. Determining a truck's direction became even harder, with multiple branches leading in different directions, deep into nearly uninhabited forest. Throughout the morning, the search teams moved slowly along the main route, stopping at each small clearing to check for sudden braking signs, dropped items, or anything related to the 3 victims. Some locations yielded household trash, but nothing matched items Daniel or Raphael typically carried. Teams also checked several areas old maps marked as former logging truck turnaround points, but these were completely empty. All traces were old, with no indication that a modern vehicle like the Mercer hauling truck had been present recently. By noon, the search expanded to 2 nearby side branches. One had minor landslides and was accessible only on foot. Rescue personnel went several hundred meters deeper, but found nothing and heard no sounds or signs of human activity. The other branch led to a thinner forest area with drier ground, but still showed no tire tracks or unusual objects. The investigation team noted that the absence of clear tire tracks severely hampered progress, as on dirt roads, any vehicle would normally leave at least some recognizable tread marks, unless the scene had been obscured by rain or the vehicle passed days earlier. However, weather reports for the previous 2 days showed no significant rainfall to erase traces. This made it difficult to conclude whether the truck had ever entered the area. In the afternoon, the K-9 unit continued sweeping lower-density tree areas, but the dogs detected no recent human scent signals. Investigating officers recorded that the forest was too vast and the logging road system too complex to complete a search in one day. However, The goal of the initial search was only to determine if any clear signs proved the presence of the 3 victims or the truck at NF 5510. By the end of the day, the investigation team concluded that the entrance area and nearby forest strip provided no direct traces leading to the location of Daniel, Emily, or Raphael. There were no personal items, no fresh tire tracks, and no suspicious stopping points along the initially scanned segment. These notes were included in the comprehensive report, confirming that the first search effort at Logging Road NF 5510 yielded no specific results and could not prove that the Mercer hauling truck had ever been in this area. On the morning of August 23, 1995, the search team returned to Logging Road NF 5510 to continue scanning areas that had not been thoroughly surveyed the previous day, this time focusing on secondary branches leading deeper into the Snoqualmie forest. The objective of the second day was to find any physical signs that the initial search had missed due to the vast terrain and limited visibility. Just about an hour after starting from the entrance to NF 5510, a search group from the King County Rescue Team discovered a small turnoff to the right that appeared to be an old, rarely used logging road branch. This branch was not clearly marked on the forestry map provided to the investigation team, but from the scene, it was evident that it had once been wide enough for logging trucks to pass through during years of prior operations. The rescue group decided to proceed deeper to assess it, and as soon as they had walked about 20 meters from the junction, they noticed 2 tire tracks that were much clearer than the surrounding road surface. Unlike the old, faded tracks left by time and smaller vehicles, these 2 tracks were wider, pressed deeper into the ground, and formed relatively even ruts, indicating that the vehicle responsible had considerable weight. Upon closer observation, the search team noted that the width of each track corresponded to the tire size of a light or medium-duty truck, and particularly, the distance between the 2 tracks matched the specifications of the box trucks formerly used by Mercer Hauling. To ensure an accurate assessment, an investigating officer measured the distance between the centers of the 2 tire tracks using a standard tape measure carried by the rescue team. The measurement was approximately 1.80–1.90 meters, matching the technical specifications of the truck that Daniel regularly used for deliveries. The depth of the tracks also indicated that the vehicle had passed not long before the marks were discovered, as the dry soil beneath the surface showed no signs of being washed away by rain or overlaid by other vehicles afterward. The group noted an additional detail in the middle section of the tire tracks. There were signs of the road surface being lightly gouged in a zigzag pattern, resembling the wheels being turned or the vehicle making a quick steering maneuver when entering this branch. This reinforced the likelihood that the vehicle had turned in here rather than continuing straight on the main NF 5510 road. 2 members of the rescue team followed the tire tracks for several dozen meters, but they began to fade as the road surface transitioned to thick forest leaf litter and sparsely scattered rocks, making the tracks difficult to see with the naked eye. Nevertheless, the mere presence of these tire tracks at this old branch turnoff was enough to draw the investigation team's attention, as in the entire area previously surveyed, they had not found any tracks as clear as these. Several officers quickly cross-referenced the on-site coordinates with the map to confirm that this was a branch likely leading to deeper sections of the logging road, areas rarely visited and difficult for vehicles to access, which also explained why the first day's search team had not detected these tire tracks. As the members regrouped, the search team leader reported the situation via radio, requesting additional personnel and establishing an expanded search zone in the direction where the tire tracks disappeared. Other members marked trees, took photographs, and recorded the relative GPS position using handheld devices. Though not absolutely precise, it was sufficient for resurveying if needed. The team's interim report stated that this was the first directly indicative evidence suggesting that the Mercer hauling truck had been present on Logging Road NF 5510. After a quick on-site analysis, the investigation team agreed that the tire tracks matched the type of truck Daniel drove and that no other vehicles in the area had similar track patterns. Therefore, they decided to focus all efforts on following the direction of the tire tracks, expanding the search scope along this secondary branch, viewing it as the most viable route leading to the next location the truck, and possibly the 3 victims, had passed through before disappearing. As the search team expanded the area in the direction of the tire tracks on the secondary branch of NF 5510, the investigation team deployed additional personnel and equipment to sweep deeper into the Snoqualmie forest, where the terrain gradually became more complex with slopes, water gullies, and dirt roads partially covered by dry leaves. While following the fading tire tracks, the lead group discovered that the secondary branch did not end, but connected to an older logging road no longer shown on the current forestry map, yet still wide enough for a light-duty truck to navigate. After passing a narrow turn, the officers saw that the area ahead opened into an intersection of 3 different logging road branches, one of which headed northwest, marked with an old wooden sign reading NF 57. Knowing that forest roads often interconnected extensively, the team leader decided to check NF 57 first, as its width aligned with the direction indicated by the tire tracks. The search team proceeded nearly half a mile further when the sight before them caused the entire group to stop immediately. The white truck bearing the Mercer hauling logo was parked on the edge of the road, about 3 meters from the forest line, near a clearing, large enough for the vehicle to turn around. The time was approximately 2:10 p.m. on August 23, 1995. The truck was parked neatly, not tilted, with no collision into any obstacles and no signs of being stuck, ruling out the scenario of a breakdown on the road. As they approached closer, the search team scanned the perimeter and confirmed no one was inside the vehicle. The cab was closed, but the doors were unlocked. Inside the cab, everything was intact. The driver's seat, passenger seat, Daniel's delivery paperwork on the dashboard, a half-empty water bottle, and Raphael's small toolbox on the floor. Daniel's bag was missing, but no backpacks or other personal items belonging to Emily or Raphael were found either. More notably, the keys were still in the ignition. The gear shift was in park, and the dashboard showed no error or mechanical issue warnings. When a rescue team technician quickly inspected the exterior, he confirmed that the tires were not flat. The exhaust and engine systems showed no signs of recent impact or damage, and the road surface under the wheels had no skid marks from spinning tires or hard braking. The ground where the truck was parked was fairly level, not a spot prone to sliding or loss of control. This immediately raised the question for the investigation team: why would a fully operational truck parked neatly, with no issues, be abandoned in the middle of a logging road? While checking the surroundings, the rescue personnel expanded the sweep to a 50-meter radius, but found no recent footprints, no signs of anyone walking away from the vehicle, and no personal items scattered around. The area was quite quiet, with the road surface covered in fine dust and dry leaves, but no clear shoe prints were imprinted. The search team leader immediately reported the location via radio for the investigation team to arrive and document the scene. Upon arrival, the officers determined the need to establish a controlled area, preventing civilians or unnecessary rescue personnel from approaching the truck to avoid disturbing potential evidence. They placed marking tape around an area approximately 20 meters around the vehicle to create a protected perimeter. Next, the field technician officer took photographs from multiple angles: the overall view of logging road NF 57, the parking position, tire marks where the truck stopped, and details of the vehicle body. Initial notes in the scene report stated that the truck showed no signs of forced entry, no broken glass fragments, and no strong external impact to the body or rear. Inside the cab, the dashboard indicated about 1/3 of a tank of fuel, consistent with Daniel having filled up at the North Bend gas station that morning. In particular, the investigation team noted that the driver's seat was adjusted to Daniel's familiar position based on Kayla's description of his habits. while the passenger seat showed no unusual shifting. This reinforced the likelihood that Daniel had driven the truck into logging road NF57 intentionally rather than the vehicle being immediately taken over at the gas station. Additionally, the officers checked the cargo bed and found the goods still intact, with no signs of unloading. For a commercial delivery run, this was even more unusual, as Daniel should have arrived in Falls City hours earlier. While documenting, the search team members re-examined the road surface behind the truck to see if the path could be traced backward. Some tire marks were still visible on the section behind, but the changing road surface between soft dirt and scattered rocks caused the tracks to be intermittent. There were also no signs of struggle, fighting, or anyone being forced to leave the vehicle under duress. The weather was turning sunnier, but the temperature under the forest canopy remained low, preserving any remaining marks on the ground fairly clearly. However, the complete absence of footprints made it difficult for the investigation team to determine the direction of movement for those who had left the vehicle. Another noted detail was the lack of any personal items, such as jackets, small bags, food, or children's belongings around the parking area, items that might likely be left behind if those inside had hurriedly exited. After completing the documentation, the investigation team decided to seal the truck according to standard procedure. A sealing tarp was placed over the cab and cargo bed. All doors were locked with numbered plastic seals, ensuring no one except the forensic technicians could access the vehicle when it was towed from the scene. The end-of-day report from the investigation team confirmed that the Mercer hauling truck had been found in intact condition, with no signs of breakdown and no victims inside. The discovery location was on logging road NF57, approximately 2 miles from the turnoff from NF 5510, and this was the first physical evidence proving that the 3 victims had left the commercial route and ventured deep into the forest road system after leaving the North Bend gas station. Immediately after the Mercer hauling truck was sealed, the investigation team proceeded to the next step, examining the surrounding area for any traces that might explain why the 3 victims left the vehicle or their subsequent direction of movement. On the morning of August 24, 1995, the search force concentrated on logging road NF57, dividing into small groups to sweep the area within a 200-meter radius from the truck's discovery location. This phase required patience and precision, as the surrounding terrain consisted of leaf-covered ground, large tree roots, dense brush, and small water gullies formed from previous rains. The first group headed northeast, where NF57 opened into a flat area interspersed with low pine bushes. They scanned each section visually, while using probing sticks to part the fallen leaves to check for any concealed objects. Despite thoroughly covering every 2 meters along the roadside slope, this group found no signs of footprints, personal items, clothing fragments, or belongings of Daniel, Emily, or Raphael. The second group surveyed westward, where the terrain had a gentle slope leading down to a small gully caused by water flow. The gully was not deep, but enough to pose difficulty for pedestrians, if not careful. The search team scanned the gully edges, as many forest vehicle abandonment cases had recorded victims accidentally falling into similar small ravines. However, the entire gully surface covered in moss and gravel fragments showed no disturbance, indicating no heavy object or person had recently passed through. All signs suggested the area had seen no human presence for several days. The third group handled the southern direction, where the forest was denser and sunlight struggled to penetrate. This was considered the highest probability area for finding traces if all 3 victims had headed that way, as the thick leaf litter could retain footprints if the moisture level was adequate. However, as the team advanced nearly 80 meters, the results remained negative. The ground was obscured by multiple layers of dry leaves, most of which were fragmented and created a surface that did not retain clear impressions. One rescue team member used a tool to scrape the surface and check the soil beneath the leaves, but found no characteristic disturbance from human footprints. When this group returned to the main road, they confirmed no physical evidence had been found. The fourth group continued sweeping northward in a semicircular pattern, examining fallen trees, uprooted stumps, and scattered small clearings. Some trees had bark stripping, but these marks were determined to be caused by wildlife rather than humans. During the search in a small clearing about 110 meters from the truck's position, one search member discovered an anomaly, a piece of blue fabric lying among the dry leaves. The fabric piece was less than 10 centimeters long, with frayed edges appearing torn rather than cut straight. This was the first piece of evidence found in the area, but it could not yet be directly linked to any victim. The color matched children's clothing or work attire, but the investigation team could not conclude it belonged to Emily or Raphael, as no family statements described similar colored clothing worn on the morning of the disappearance. The search team immediately marked the discovery location with a plastic stake, photographed it, and requested a technician to collect the sample under evidence preservation protocol. The soil beneath the fabric showed no signs of compression or strong disturbance, suggesting the piece may have been there for some time or blown in from elsewhere. This limited the fabric's evidentiary value, but it remained the only distinct object found in the entire sweep radius. Beyond this fabric piece, the investigation team found no other items, no shoes, bags, food, paper scraps, or drop marks. The most puzzling aspect was the absence of footprints. Although the terrain could erase or obscure some traces, the complete lack of any signs from 3 adults and a child in the immediate vicinity of the truck was inconsistent with typical behavior patterns. One investigating officer noted in the report that if the 3 had left the vehicle on foot in any direction, at least some traces, displaced leaves, compressed soil, or toe marks should have been present. However, cross-checking among the 4 search groups revealed no such signs. The investigation team also considered the possibility of footprints being erased by weather, but meteorological data for the previous 3 days showed no significant rain, reducing the likelihood of natural erasure. By late afternoon, the entire 200-meter radius around the truck had been swept 3 times using 3 methods: ground scanning, roadside edge checks, and targeted suspicious point surveys. The final results were recorded. Only one piece of evidence, a blue fabric fragment of unclear origin, with no other clues indicating the direction of movement of the 3 victims after the truck was abandoned on Logging Road, NF 57. After completing the examination of the area around the truck, and noting that only one unidentified piece of blue fabric was found within a 200-meter radius, the investigation team moved on to the next task: reconstructing the entire timeline from the moment the 3 victims left the North Bend gas station at 10:28 a.m. until the truck was discovered on Logging Road, NF 57, in the afternoon of August 23. This was a critical step to determine the period during which Daniel, Emily, and Raphael disappeared from all recorded traces. First, the officers compiled all the data from the initial phase of the investigation. The gas station camera confirmed the truck's departure time. The North Bend to Fall City route showed no appearance of the vehicle. Local residents along the road did not see the truck, and there were no reports of accidents or traffic incidents. To reconstruct the timeline, they used 10:28 a.m. as the last verified point and examined each possible road segment that could be traveled in the first 5-10 minutes after leaving the station. With an average speed of 40-50 km per h in the North Bend urban area, Daniel could have turned onto Logging Road, NF 5510, between approximately 10:30 and 10:33 a.m., just a few minutes after leaving the station. Traffic maps from 1995 showed that from the entrance to NF 5510 to the turn onto the side branch leading to NF 57 would take an additional 10-12 minutes if driving slowly due to poor road conditions. Thus, in a reasonable scenario, the truck could have gone from the gas station onto the Logging Road within 15 minutes of the last time it was seen. When the investigation team compared this to the location where the truck was found on NF 57, they determined that the entire route could be traveled in about 20 minutes without any issues. This raised a key question: if the truck left the station at 10:28 a.m. and took around 20 minutes to reach NF 57, why was there no further data on the 3 victims after 10:50 a.m.? There were no witnesses who saw them at the forest edge, no resident reports of unusual noises, and most importantly, no traces on the road leading to the abandoned truck's location. When piecing all this data together, The investigation team officially established the 90-minute gap, the period from when the truck left the gas station to the latest reasonable time Daniel could have driven it onto NF 57. During those 90 minutes, there was no signal of the vehicle's movement on main roads. No cameras captured the truck at intersections, no resident saw the three victims or the truck, and there were no signs they contacted anyone by phone. This gap became the central point of suspicion in the investigation, as it indicated that all three had left the commercial route just minutes after departing the gas station, but all traces of them vanished immediately afterward. Upon deeper analysis, the investigators ruled out the possibility that the three stopped the vehicle to rest or handle a minor issue. Because if they had voluntarily left the truck to check it or change route, there would at least be footprints, signs of activity, or dropped items around the stop area. However, the examination had confirmed the surrounding area was completely clean, with no evidence of recent human activity. This led to the conclusion that the three victims leaving the truck did not occur at the location where it was found, but very likely happened earlier along the journey within the logging road system. Additionally, the investigation team analyzed the possibility that the truck was moved not by Daniel himself. The key detail of the keys still in the ignition and the driver's seat remaining in Daniel's usual position suggested he drove it onto the logging road, but that did not rule out someone intervening after the truck had stopped. When considering these factors together, the team noted there was no evidence Daniel intended to deviate from the commercial route. On the other hand, there were no signs they encountered an accident or vehicle issue on the main road. The truck appearing deep in the logging road, an area rarely visited, reinforced the assessment that the three victims had been pulled from their normal journey by an external factor. Furthermore, the statements at the gas station about a strange man appearing near Daniel and a dark green pickup truck leaving the lot right after them prompted the investigation team to consider the possibility of third-party intervention. If this scenario occurred, it fit the 90-minute gap. Daniel and his two companions left the gas station, were approached or forced to change route in the first few minutes, and that intervention caused them to disappear from all expected paths. After systematizing all the data, the investigation team recorded in the report that the likelihood of the three victims voluntarily changing their route was very low, and an external intervention factor stemming from an event occurring between 10:30 a.m. and 12 p.m. on August 20th was the hypothesis most consistent with all available evidence. After establishing the 90-minute gap along with the assessment that external intervention was highly likely, the investigation team moved to a deeper review of Daniel Mercer's relationships and business activities to determine if any individual had a motive to cause him to leave the commercial route on the morning of the disappearance. One group of officers was assigned to work with tax records, transaction reports, and recent customer lists from Mercer Hauling, while other investigators interviewed former colleagues, regular customers, and those who had worked with Daniel in the months leading up to the incident. From the financial data, Mercer Hauling was a small business with only 2 employees, Daniel and Raphael, primarily taking small transport contracts from furniture stores and local construction projects. Revenue was stable, with no large bank debts or signs of unusual spending. However, among the invoices and receipts, the investigation team noted a series of transactions involving a customer named Caleb Rourke, who lived on the southern edge of Falls City. Rourke had hired Daniel to transport woodworking equipment and materials for a personal project in early August. According to notes in Daniel's books, the contract was completed but showed signs of disagreement over payment. In an internal delivery receipt, not sent to the customer that Daniel kept, he noted that Rourke was slow to pay and had argued heatedly when Daniel demanded timely payment. When investigators gathered additional external information, an employee at a Falls City hardware store recalled Daniel mentioning that working with Rourke gave him a headache and that this customer was unreliable. A former colleague of Daniel's from 2 years prior said Daniel tried to avoid contracts with people known for payment issues, and Rourke was mentioned as one such case. To corroborate the information, the investigation team asked residents near Rourke's area, One neighbor reported seeing Daniel visit Rourke's home twice in the previous month, once for delivery and once to discuss something the neighbor described as not pleasant, as they heard a short but clear argument. Police noted that Rourke lived in a wooden cabin deep in the forest near Fall City, close to the logging road system, a notable coincidence since that was also the area where the truck was found. When cross-referencing maps, investigators found that roads NF 5510 and NF 57 were actually not too far north of where Rourke lived, significantly increasing the value of this information in the investigation. Beyond financial data, the investigation team continued searching for criminal history or civil disputes involving Rourke. Legal records showed he had one minor report related to a neighbor conflict over forestry road usage rights, but no serious prior convictions. However, a notable point was that Rourke was described by locals as hot-tempered and unpredictable, especially regarding money or land issues. These scattered pieces of information began forming a concerning pattern. Daniel Mercer had a financial dispute with someone living near the logging road where the truck was abandoned. One investigator clearly noted in the report that although there was no direct evidence linking Rourke to the disappearance, the connection between his home location, past uncooperative behavior, and the financial dispute provided sufficient grounds to add him to the list of people needing interviews. This evidence became even more important when combined with the gas station statements about an unidentified man approaching Daniel just before he left, and the station employee's description of the man somewhat matching certain features of Rourke in personal records. At the end of the review phase, the investigation team agreed to add Caleb Rourke to the priority interview and alibi verification list. This was not a conclusion of criminality, but a necessary evaluation based on financial conflicts and geographic coincidences between Rourke's residence and the truck discovery area. After adding Caleb Rourke to the list of people to interview, based on financial conflicts and his residence near the truck discovery area, the investigation team decided to conduct a direct interrogation on the afternoon of August 24, 1995. Two investigators arrived at Rourke's wooden cabin, set deep in the forest south of Fall City, described as hard to access and surrounded by many small turns leading to secondary logging roads. Upon approaching the cabin, they noted the surrounding area was quite cluttered, with supply barrels, old tires, and various repair tools scattered around. Rourke appeared after the second knock, seeming cautious but cooperative with the request to talk. In the initial interrogation, the investigators focused on verifying Rourke's whereabouts on the morning of August 20th, the time Daniel, Emily, and Raphael disappeared. Rourke stated he was at home all morning, working in the yard, and not leaving the cabin area. However, when asked specifically about the period from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m., Rourke could not provide any reliable alibi evidence. No one witnessed him at home. He had no landline phone to record calls, and there were no purchases or transactions to confirm his presence elsewhere. When asked if anyone visited or if he heard anyone passing by, Rourke replied that in this area, people rarely come through, and he didn't notice if any vehicles entered the nearby logging road. This made Rourke's alibi vague and unverifiable independently, but not sufficient to conclude he had left the cabin at the time of the disappearance. During the conversation, the investigators asked about the financial dispute between him and Daniel. After a few seconds of silence, Rourke admitted to a minor payment disagreement but said it was just a misunderstanding and he had no reason to cause trouble with Daniel. He stated the remaining amount was intended to be paid the following week. However, when asked to provide receipts or notes related to the transaction, Rourke said everything was in cash and he didn't keep paperwork. This detail was not inconsistent with the habits of some forest residents, but it made it difficult for the investigation team to objectively verify whether the dispute had been resolved. After the initial questioning, the investigators requested permission to check Rourke's cabin. Under 1995 Washington law, searching the cabin required voluntary consent or a warrant, but Rourke agreed to a quick inspection of the living areas and outside yard. The cabin was small, with 2 bedrooms, a shared living room, and a kitchen. Throughout the inspection, the investigation team found no mud-stained clothing, no suspicious unfamiliar items, no blood traces, and no signs anyone else had been in the cabin around the time of the disappearance. The outside yard contained many old items, but nothing related to Mercer hauling or any belongings of Daniel or Raphael. The outdoor repair area had many tools, but no signs of recent use. Dust covered evenly, with no fresh stains. Investigators noted the cabin had a back door leading to a small trail, but the trail was covered in dry leaves for days, indicating no significant recent activity. In the next part of the interrogation, the investigators asked about the dark green pickup truck witnessed at the gas station on the morning of the disappearance. When asked if he owned or had driven a similar colored pickup, Rourke denied it and said he only had an old rust-red Jeep parked beside the cabin. A physical check confirmed this. The Jeep was old but functional, did not match the witness description in color, and showed no recent modifications. However, Rourke's cabin was near a complex logging road intersection where any vehicle could pass without him noticing, so his lack of a dark green pickup did not rule out others using the logging roads at that time. At the end of the interrogation, the investigators assessed that Rourke's demeanor was somewhat tense, but not unusual for an isolated resident unfamiliar with police contact. He cooperated moderately, did not obstruct the cabin check, and gave no clearly contradictory statements. However, the lack of verifiable alibi kept his name on the monitoring list. According to the internal report, the investigation team concluded that Caleb Rourke did not yet qualify as a primary suspect. There was no physical evidence, no traces at the cabin, no direct connection to the truck found on NF 57, and the financial dispute with Daniel was not strong enough to establish a clear motive for coercion or violence. His name remained for further verification as new data emerged, but the investigation focus at this point could not be placed on Rourke. After the initial interrogation of Caleb Rourke and confirming his cabin provided no direct clues, the investigation team decided to expand the search to a wider terrain area, since focusing on NF 57 yielded no progress. On August 26, 1995, search teams were deployed to the Rattlesnake Ridge area, a mountain range stretching between North Bend and the Snoqualmie Forest, known for steep ravines, dense forest sections, and a complex trail system connecting to the logging roads below. Although no data confirmed Daniel, Emily, or Raphael had moved to this area, the command team assessed Rattlesnake Ridge needed checking because it was the natural extension adjoining the NF 57 logging roads. If the group left the truck for any reason, they might have inadvertently gone deeper along steep trails up the ridge. The search force included K-9 units, climbing teams, and rugged terrain rescue personnel, divided into 3 groups along the main trails: Rattlesnake Ledge Trail, Old Sea Road, and the area near Upper Falls. Their task was to look for signs of human activity, clothing, packaging scraps, child items, footprints, or any objects connectable to the 3 victims. The first group moved along Rattlesnake Ledge Trail, where terrain included many steep sections and limited visibility due to thick brush. They scanned trail edges, checked natural rock alcoves, and resting spots commonly used by hikers. Besides a few candy wrappers and food packaging from visitors, nothing notable was found. The second group was assigned to survey the eastern ravine area, where terrain shifted abruptly from relatively flat trails to deep, hard-to-access gorges. Some slopes were dangerous enough that rescue teams used safety ropes to move. At each stop, they checked for slide marks, disturbed soil or rocks, or objects fallen from height. However, all areas showed natural signs: old broken rocks, long accumulated forest leaves, no fresh marks, or evidence of passage on August 20th. The third group, including a K-9 team, moved into the deeper western ridge forest, connecting to trails down to NF 57. This was considered the most critical point, because if victims left the truck and wandered on foot, this area had high likelihood of footprints. However, after over 2 hours of continuous sweeping, the dogs detected no matching scents. Only near mid-afternoon did the search team record a potentially promising clue: an empty soda can near a large root cluster about 25 meters off the trail. When picked up, the can was not fully dust-covered, like older cans commonly found along trails, and appeared newer relative to the surroundings. The soda type also matched the can Emily was holding at the North Bend gas station in the August 20th camera footage. Nonetheless, investigators had to be extremely cautious. Rattlesnake Ridge is a popular hiking spot, and this soda was one of the most common drinks carried by visitors. There were no clear fingerprints remaining on the can, no distinctive cuts or tears, and nothing proving it belonged to one of the three victims. The forensics team collected the soda can and noted the location by GPS for map cross-reference. Though this was an indirect clue, it was not strong enough to establish a firm link to the disappearance. When the search team expanded 100 meters around the soda can location, they still found no additional evidence, no clothing, no shoes, no child items, no movement signs. One rescue member noted that if the can belonged to the victim group, there should be more signs around because the steep, dense terrain would cause anyone moving to leave basic traces. But the area was completely clean, similar to the entire NF57 region previously. By the end of the day, the search force concluded that although Rattlesnake Ridge was an important and complex area, they found no evidence confirming the three victims had ever been there. The soda can was entered into records, but noted that the likelihood it was just litter from a hiker was very high. The second day of forest searching thus continued without yielding definitive results, and the investigation leadership recorded in the minutes that expanding the search to Rattlesnake Ridge did not provide new valuable data to determine the three victims' direction of movement after the Mercer hauling truck was abandoned. When the search at Rattlesnake Ridge concluded without yielding any verifiable evidence, the investigation team convened a full progress summary meeting on the morning of August 27, 1995, at the temporary office set up near the Snoqualmie Forest. Attendees included the field commander, the forensics team, representatives from the forest rescue forces, the analysis group, and 3 officers responsible for constructing the disappearance timeline. The meeting began with a systematization of the findings over the 7 days of investigation. The last sighting at the North Bend gas station. The truck found at NF57 in intact condition. The 200-meter sweep around the vehicle, showing no traces. The NF 5510 branch road, only providing matching tire tracks, but no confirmation of the final direction of travel, and the Rattlesnake Ridge area, yielding no evidence that the 3 victims had ever been present. The forensics team reported that the seized blue fabric piece had no identifiable biological traces and was very likely unrelated. The soda can at the ridge was assessed as litter from hikers, thus, all current physical evidence was insufficient to establish a direct link to Daniel, Emily, or Raphael. When re-evaluating the area where the truck was discovered, the commander emphasized that if the 3 victims had left the vehicle on foot, they would inevitably have left some biological or mechanical traces. But the entire logging roads NF57 and NF 5510 recorded nothing beyond the initial tire tracks. The rescue teams confirmed no signs of landslides, broken branches, or footprints, and search dogs picked up no scent. The terrain analysis team further reported that the number of intersecting forest roads in the area was too vast to fully sweep in a short time. But even if the vehicle or victims had gone deeper into the forest, they would expect to find minimal signs such as dropped items, fabric scraps, or disturbance traces. However, the entire area was unusually clean. Meanwhile, the timeline construction group reiterated the key point: the 90-minute gap could not be explained by voluntary wandering, getting lost in the woods, or an accident. Nevertheless, there was no new physical evidence to prove external intervention. This left the investigation in a temporary deadlock. When analyzing the possibility that the scene lay outside the searched area, the analysis team stressed that the Snoqualmie Forest area and connecting logging roads could extend for hundreds of miles, and indefinitely expanding the search was unrealistic without specific leads. The rescue forces also reported that their team had reached the limit of effectiveness for visual searches in dense forest conditions, and any subsequent search wave would consume significant resources without guaranteeing proportional results. In the open discussion portion, one officer suggested using helicopters for aerial scanning, but the aviation team representative noted that visibility was severely limited by the forest canopy, even with infrared cameras, and the chances of detecting small objects like clothing or 3 covered bodies were very low. Some opinions suggested re-examining Caleb Rourke, but the investigative analysis team responded that there was no legal basis to return to the cabin or summon him a second time without new evidence. All agreed that designating Rourke as the primary suspect at this point was unreasonable. At the end of the meeting, the field commander required each group to report on the potential for additional evidence in the already scanned areas. All reached similar conclusions. There were no indications to continue digging deeper at NF 57, NF 5510, or Rattlesnake Ridge unless new data emerged. The Forest Rescue Force leader stated clearly that without specific guidance, continuing the search would only be repetitive and unlikely to produce new results. Therefore, after compiling opinions, the investigation team made an official proposal: temporarily suspend field searches to shift focus to data analysis, reviewing witness statements, and examining Daniel Mercer's personal relationships. This proposal was recorded in the end-of-day minutes, marking the withdrawal of rescue forces from the Snoqualmie Forest area until new information, significant enough to redeploy, became available. After the investigation team agreed to temporarily suspend field search activities and concluded that no viable leads remained to continue expanding the scope in the Snoqualmie Forest, the missing persons case file for Daniel Mercer, Emily Mercer, and Rafael Torres was transferred to the final summary phase of 1995. On August 29, the King County Sheriff's Office officially placed the file in missing persons unsolved status in accordance with procedures for disappearances lacking verifiable physical evidence, no bodies, and no primary investigative direction. In the internal minutes, the supervising commander noted clearly that all search efforts in the forest, logging roads, mountain slopes, and side branches had yielded no evidence strong enough to maintain large-scale rescue forces. Each specialized team completed their corresponding reports. The forensics team compiled the collected evidence, including the blue fabric piece, the soda can found at Rattlesnake Ridge, soil samples from around the truck, and over 60 crime scene photos, then sealed them in evidence boxes, coded according to 1995 standards, and placed them in county storage. The data analysis team completed the full investigation timeline, from 10:28 a.m. at the North Bend gas station to the discovery of the truck at NF 57, while noting that the 90-minute gap remained unexplained by any natural event, but also lacked sufficient basis to conclude criminal elements. All related statements, from the gas station employee, pickup truck drivers, Daniel's neighbors, Raphael's friends, and the interrogation of Caleb Rourke, were converted to official transcripts and filed in the case records. The search teams completed minutes describing the scope and forecasted that if the 3 victims had left the vehicle and walked, survival chances were low after many days in complex terrain. However, there was no evidence proving they had gone in that direction. Search maps, GPS notes, swept routes, and field descriptions were all backed up for potential case reopening if new data emerged in the future. At the end of the day, the field commander signed the decision to halt all search activities, returning rescue forces to regular duties. The Mercer hauling truck, after being towed to temporary storage, remained sealed, as there was no legal basis to return it to the family or process it as an accident. The King County Sheriff's Office internal communique emphasized that the case would not be permanently closed, but classified as periodic monitoring, meaning investigators would review the case quarterly if new reports or discoveries regarding evidence, witnesses, or bodies arose. However, no dedicated team was assigned to follow the case daily. Daniel and Emily's family was officially notified that search activities had been suspended and the case shifted to unsolved status. The notification sent to them acknowledged that although the truck had been found, no traces confirmed the location of the 3 individuals since leaving the gas station. Rafael Torres's family received a similar notification, explaining that all investigative possibilities in 1995 had been maximally exploited. Placing the file in missing persons unsolved status ended the nearly 2-week active investigation phase, leaving the 3 families without answers and the North Bend community immersed in prolonged unease. Following the missing persons file being placed in missing persons unsolved status and the official withdrawal of search forces from the Snoqualmie Forest area at the end of August 1995, the entire logging road system around NF 57 and NF 5510 fell into a state of near total lack of monitoring. In 1996, the rainy season in King County arrived early and stronger than forecasted, causing a series of small landslides on the already degraded forest roads. In early February 1996, the U.S. Forest Service reported a severe landslide in the middle section of Logging Road, NF 5510, less than a mile from the intersection with NF 57. According to technical maps, this was the area directly connecting to the side branch where the search team had previously detected tire tracks matching the Mercer hauling vehicle. The mass of earth and rock sliding down from the hillside above completely blocked the road, creating a layer of soil 1 to 3 meters thick, covering the old road surface. Moreover, runoff from heavy rain washed away part of the soft soil into the valley below, making the road structure dangerous for any vehicle attempting access. After surveying the scene, the Forest Service issued an official notice closing the entire NF 5510 segment from the main entrance to the intersection leading back to NF 57. Warning signs were posted at 2 points: the NF 5510 entrance near North Bend and the southern intersection connecting to the side road system. No access signs were posted in accordance with federal regulations due to ongoing landslide risks. This made re-accessing the area that had been the focus of the 1995 investigation nearly impossible by motorized vehicles. In subsequent internal reports, the King County Sheriff's Office noted that although the area related to the Mercer disappearance remained in an open file, deploying additional searches was not feasible for safety or logistical reasons. Many investigators who had participated in the case opined that the landslide may have buried traces that the 1995 search team had not yet detected, especially parts of the side branch where the tire tracks gradually faded. If any evidence had been near the surface, footprints, fabric pieces, small items, or even bodies, the likelihood of them being buried under tons of earth and rock was very high. By late spring 1997, another section of NF 5510 suffered severe erosion. Prolonged rain created deep gullies, causing the road structure to be segmented into multiple disconnected points. The Forest Service issued a second closure order, extending the prohibited range to nearly 2 miles, encompassing the danger zone, including the junction between NF 5510 and the small turnoff to NF 57. Many local residents expressed concerns that this area could become a hotspot for larger landslides in the future due to the steep terrain and insufficient vegetation to hold the soil. Around the same time, the Sheriff's Office received several requests from victims' families hoping to reopen small-scale searches, but the Forest Service's technical reports made this impossible. Engineers assessed that anyone walking into the landslide zone risked further soil collapse, especially on high humidity days. In 1998, after a particularly harsh winter, a large portion of NF 5510 slid to the point where the old road surface was no longer recognizable. Updated Forest Service maps even completely removed this road segment from the list of usable forest roads. The suspicious area, once identified as the likely direction of travel for the Mercer hauling truck, was buried under a new layer of earth and rock, nearly twice as thick as in 1996. Large trees swept along by the landslide created overlapping pits, completely distorting the terrain. This meant that if any clues had been subsurface in 1995, they were entirely inaccessible by any standard search methods. In the report submitted to King County at the end of 1998, the Forest Service chief engineer wrote clearly, "The NF 5510 area no longer meets conditions for safe human access. Any search or excavation activities would pose serious danger." This wording was added by the investigation team to the case file as an official note, meaning that the range with high potential to hold answers to the disappearance of the 3 victims now lay beyond technical access capabilities. This also closed off all efforts to continue scanning the route, turning the 1995 investigation's focal area into a naturally blockaded zone, buried and without remnants of the old road surface. From 1996 to 1998, the terrain in the Snoqualmie Forest changed to the extent that investigators described in notes that the road leading to the truth may have sunk under tons of earth and rock, causing the disappearance of Daniel Mercer, Emily Mercer, and Rafael Torres to fall into near absolute silence. After logging road NF 5510 was completely blockaded and the directly related suspicious area was buried under tons of earth and rock, the case of Daniel Mercer, Emily Mercer, and Rafael Torres gradually shifted from a large-scale search to a topic sporadically appearing in the North Bend community life. During the 1999-2002 period, as the Snoqualmie Forest terrain continued to change and technical re-access to the scene area became impossible, rumors and speculations among residents spread more widely than the 1995 investigation team had anticipated. In community gatherings, at coffee shops, and even in school hallways, the disappearance was recounted in various versions, blending facts, faded memories, and baseless guesses. Some believed the 3 victims had met an accident deeper in the forest, and their bodies were buried by subsequent landslides. Others proposed criminal elements, arguing that the truck was abandoned too intact to be the result of a natural accident. Although official information from the King County Sheriff's Office never confirmed any scenario, rumors still spread in their own way, embellished over time. In all the discussions, Caleb Rourke was the name that appeared most frequently. The prior financial dispute between him and Daniel Mercer became the central story in numerous oral versions. Although the 1995 interrogation yielded no incriminating evidence, many local residents still viewed him as the most likely involved. Some claimed to have seen a dark green pickup parked near Rourke's cabin in the weeks around the disappearance. Others rumored that he disappeared from town for a few days right after the news spread, a detail entirely unconfirmed. In reality, Rourke continued living in his cabin, with minimal interaction, but without leaving the area. Investigators noted that from 1996 onward, he barely engaged with the community, possibly due to fatigue from the speculations. However, his silence inadvertently fueled negative theories. Many residents believe that if he had nothing to hide, he would have actively participated in community meetings or contacted police to clarify. These rumors were not based on data, but merely reflected the unease of a small town trying to explain an unanswered vanishing. Despite the strong spread of rumors, no accurate information was submitted to the sheriff's office. For 3 consecutive years, there were no new witnesses, no new physical evidence found, and no reports from residents providing clear directions to reopen the file. The original 1995 investigation team, which had been reassigned to other duties, still periodically reviewed the case, but each review reached the same conclusion: no new data to act on. In 2000, Rafael Torres's family once again sent a letter requesting a search reopening after another small landslide near the edge of NF 57, but the Forest Service technical report stated that the landslide point was unrelated to the old suspicious segment and access remained dangerous. The case file was reviewed at an internal meeting in November of that year and maintained missing persons, unsolved status. Daniel and Emily's family also approached police multiple times, submitting additional photos and personal items for the file, but no details held investigative value. By 2002, as memories of the disappearance marked 7 years, several small articles in local newspapers revisited the case as an unsolved mystery of North Bend. Some articles even rekindled speculation about Rourke's involvement, but police were compelled to issue a statement affirming no evidence designated him as a suspect. Nevertheless, rumors continued to persist alongside the prolonged deadlock of the file. Throughout this period, the disappearance of Daniel, Emily, and Raphael was not reopened. There were no new search forces, no additional search warrants, and no further interrogations conducted. The file continued to sit in King County storage, not forgotten, but completely without basis to advance even one step. From 2003 to 2005, even though the community continued to bring up the disappearance as a mysterious story from the North Bend area, the forensic technology of that period was still not advanced enough to break the 8-year deadlock. Amid the victims' families' hopes in scientific progress, the King County Sheriff's Office conducted its routine annual case review in early 2003, but quickly realized that the forensic technology available at the time, despite certain advancements, could not assist in processing the evidence collected in 1995. One of the most discussed technologies back then was touch DNA, a technique that allowed analysis of DNA traces from extremely small amounts of cells left on objects. However, the early 2000s version of touch DNA was highly limited, low sensitivity, high risk of cross-contamination, and the requirement that evidence be preserved in near-perfect conditions. In the Mercer case file, the primary evidence included a piece of blue fabric, a soda can collected at Rattlesnake Ridge, soil samples taken around the truck, and crime scene photographs. All of this evidence, according to the forensics lab's assessment, was unsuitable for touch DNA testing. Fabric piece was contaminated due to exposure to the open forest environment. The soda can had oxidized surfaces and had been exposed to multiple factors that had likely destroyed any potential DNA traces. The soil and forest leaf samples were completely unusable for DNA extraction, given the technical capabilities of 2003. The forensics lab report stated clearly, no evidence item meets the minimum standards for new-style DNA testing. The likelihood of obtaining identifiable results is virtually zero. This meant that although forensic technology was starting to raise expectations, in reality, the evidence from the disappearance had been preserved according to 1995 standards that did not account for the possibility of DNA analysis years later. At the same time, investigators proposed reanalyzing the tire tracks found at NF 5510, but the technical team noted that the low-resolution photographs combined with terrain erosion had rendered the sample impossible to match to any specific tire type, even if tire tread comparison technology had improved. Regarding the Mercer hauling truck, which remained sealed in storage, the technical team continued to confirm that there were no clear fingerprints on the interior surfaces, and any remaining prints were blurred or contaminated due to the long period it had been parked in the forest before recovery. No DNA, no fingerprints, no soft tissue or biological traces. The truck, despite being the largest piece of evidence, could not advance the case further. During the 2004 review, a young investigator newly transferred to the unit proposed sending the evidence to the FBI's analysis lab, where new technologies sometimes yielded results even from old evidence. However, the FBI required that evidence have the potential to contain intact biological linkage DNA, or at least visible biological traces. Upon reviewing the evidence list, the FBI Intake Division concluded that the Midtown Snoqualmie case did not meet testing criteria. This rejection did not imply the case was unimportant, but rather that the evidence lacked the necessary foundation for any technical progress. In that context, investigators clearly recognized one reality: this disappearance could not be advanced by early 2000s forensic science. With touch DNA still in its infancy, and no blood, tissue, or bodily fluids to analyze, all efforts remained theoretical. At the end of 2005, the case file was once again evaluated in the quarterly review meeting. Once more, the report concluded there was no new data, no viable evidence, and no witnesses had emerged since 1995. The NF 5510 terrain remained closed off, Rattlesnake Ridge provided no additional data, and all community theories remained mere speculation. As the meeting concluded, The lead officer noted the familiar conclusion: file maintained as missing persons, unsolved, insufficient grounds to reopen active investigation. The disappearance of Daniel Mercer, Emily Mercer, and Rafael Torres continued to drift into silence, a file never forgotten, but firmly constrained by the forensic technology limitations of that era. From 2006 to 2008, although the disappearance file remained classified as missing persons, unsolved, with no active investigation, sporadic tips from the community began to surface, the most notable being a new statement related to Caleb Rourke. In April 2006, the King County Sheriff's Office received a call from a man identifying himself as a former co-worker of Daniel Mercer, who had worked with him in 1993-1994 on a small construction materials transport project in Falls City. The man said he had hesitated for years before contacting them, unsure if his information was relevant, but after rereading an article marking the 10-year anniversary of the disappearance, he felt compelled to report it. In an informal interview at the sheriff's office, the man provided a new detail: he had witnessed a heated argument between Daniel and Caleb Rourke at a materials yard near Falls City about a year and a half before the disappearance. According to his account, the argument occurred on a late summer afternoon while Daniel was delivering materials, and Rourke showed up to inspect the order. The man described Rourke as hot-tempered and out of control, yelling about being overcharged beyond the agreement. Daniel, naturally calm, tried to explain, but Rourke reportedly threatened that he wouldn't let it slide if something like that happened again. The man stated he had seen it as a normal business dispute and hadn't thought much of it. But when he heard about Daniel's disappearance in 1995, he felt the memory was worth reporting, though he was out of state at the time and hadn't followed the case closely. The receiving investigator documented the statement, noting the description, timing, and location of the argument, and cross-referenced it with prior files. Although the statement suggested the relationship between Daniel and Rourke may have been more strained than the 1995 investigation team knew, it provided no direct information linking Rourke to the disappearance. There were no traces, no other witnesses to confirm the event, and no physical evidence connecting Rourke to the truck at NF 57. When investigators reviewed Rourke's file again, the results mirrored old assessments: no serious criminal history, no unusual financial activity, and no 1995 neighbor reports indicating he left his cabin around the time of the disappearance. Beyond this new statement, during 2006-2008, the sheriff's office received a few calls from locals offering speculations about Rourke, mostly centered on his reclusive lifestyle and limited community involvement. Some claimed his avoidance of social interaction was a sign something was off, but these arguments were purely subjective and unusable as investigative data. Though occasional reports claimed sightings of lights or strange noises from Rourke's cabin at night, cross-checks found no matching reports. Investigators concluded this was simply the result of widespread suspicion after years of an unsolved case. In September 2007, a young officer newly joined to the investigative unit proposed re-interviewing Rourke based on the new statement, but command rejected it due to lack of sufficient legal or procedural grounds. The sole statement only described a conflict years earlier and provided no new evidence that Rourke had been near the logging road on August 20, 1995. In the 2008 file review, when the analysis team re-evaluated all Rourke-related data, they concluded that although he remained the name most associated with community suspicion, the investigative file contained nothing meeting the criteria to reopen the case. No physical evidence, no scent detected by K9 units at the cabin in 1995, no vehicle connection since he did not own a green pickup truck, and no specific timeline data proving any link to the abandoned truck. The new statement was added to the file appendix, classified as informational only, reference information without independent investigative value. After the final 2008 review meeting, the Mercer disappearance file continued to be maintained as missing persons, unsolved, not reopened, and with no new investigative direction. Although the statement about serious conflict between Daniel and Rourke was considered noteworthy, It was not enough to alter the case's trajectory, and the 3 victims remained vanished without a trace for over a decade since leaving the North Bend gas station. 2005 marked a strange phase in the Mercer disappearance when new information emerged. Not enough to change the investigative direction, but sufficient to force the King County Sheriff's Office to consider that the Snoqualmie forest might still hold scattered fragments of the truth. In March of that year, a forest worker from the Trail Maintenance Unit reported that while clearing an old logging trail near the eastern edge of Rattlesnake Ridge, he discovered a strip of blue fabric caught in low bushes. The strip was about 15–20 centimeters long, with uneven frayed edges, appearing torn in a twisting manner, similar to the small fabric piece found near the Mercer holing truck in 1995. The worker admitted he wasn't sure if it was related to the disappearance, but the color and frayed texture reminded him of the high-profile case from years earlier, compelling him to turn it over to authorities. When the evidence was transferred to the King County Forensics Lab, technicians opened the old evidence files for comparison. The new fabric strip was described as thin, synthetic fiber, commonly used in work clothing or inexpensive jackets. The old 1995 piece, found at NF 57, was similarly blue, but smaller. The fact that 2 fabric pieces appeared in different areas of the forest road system prompted technicians to evaluate carefully. However, upon physical analysis, they quickly concluded there was no basis to determine they came from the same source. Different weave patterns, different elasticity, and different fading levels, suggesting they could belong to entirely different garments. Still, what they could not do was DNA analysis. Although touch DNA had improved slightly since 2003, by 2009, it was still not sensitive enough to handle environmentally contaminated evidence over long periods. The new strip had been exposed to sun and rain for years, its surface covered in pollen dust, small moss, and fine soil particles. This meant any potential biological traces, if present, had degraded or become contaminated beyond extraction. Technicians attempted surface scanning with fluorescence methods, but detected no intact cell samples. Further sampling attempts using moist swabs yielded no clear cells suitable for analysis. The lead forensics technician concluded that the sample has exceeded the threshold for any current DNA technique. The forensics report noted that although the color evoked the 1995 case, the new fabric strip contained no useful identifying information and could not be linked to any specific individual, whether victim or outsider. This led to the strip being quickly classified as weak evidence, a term used when data is insufficient to advance investigation, but still worth storing in case future technology improves. When the strip was presented to the investigative team in the mid-2009 file review meeting, investigators immediately cross-referenced the report. Although they agreed that the logging roads around Rattlesnake Ridge were areas the victims might have passed through, nothing in the new information met the threshold to reopen the file. No DNA, no scent, no matching fiber structure, and no associated witnesses. They agreed to classify the evidence as informational. No action, similar to the 1995 fabric piece. When news spread beyond King County, some locals speculated that finding another blue fabric piece might indicate the 3 victims had ventured deeper into the forest, but police issued a reassuring statement: there is no evidence confirming the fabric is related to the Mercer disappearance. In 2010, another file review was conducted. The analysis team reopened all notes related to evidence, including photos of the new strip and the GPS location where the worker found it. However, that location was more than 4 miles as the crow flies from NF 57, exceeding the range a group of 3, including a young child, could naturally walk if they left the vehicle without direct threat. This made the fabric more of a distracting factor than a genuine clue. Ultimately, the strip was repackaged in protective storage, labeled evidence M2009-17, and placed in county storage alongside the old 1995 evidence. It was stored for one purpose only, awaiting future advancements in forensic technology. In the end of 2010 minutes, the case lead officer wrote, insufficient basis to reopen investigation. New evidence stored, but current forensic value zero. The disappearance of Daniel Mercer, Emily Mercer, and Rafael Torres, entering its 15th year, still had no progress, and the blue fabric strip simply became a small addition to the chain of weak evidence prolonging the unsolved file. 2013 marked the first turning point after nearly 2 decades of deadlock in the disappearance of Daniel Mercer, Emily Mercer, and Rafael Torres. After more than 17 years of closure due to repeated landslides, the U.S. Forest Service announced a limited restoration plan for Logging Road, NF 5510, to support new geological survey activities for the state of Washington. In May 2013, geological engineers and work crews were deployed to the area hardest hit by landslides in 1996 and 1998. The terrain had stabilized after years of drier weather, and the massive earth and rock that had buried the entire road section had eroded over time, exposing parts of the old road surface. During the process of clearing surface soil and removing fallen trees blocking the path, a group of workers discovered a strange object buried under layers of decayed roots and accumulated forest leaves. At first, they thought it was just an old piece of cloth, but upon pulling it up, the group realized it was a nearly completely rotted children's backpack. Torn straps, frayed fabric, rusted zipper, and exterior covered in years of damp soil. However, what made them immediately stop work was the item inside, a small cloth doll piece, just the doll's head, round shape, with remnants of pink thread around the edge, and part of an embroidered eye that had faded. One worker, a longtime North Bend resident, recognized it might be related to the famous 1995 disappearance, as he clearly remembered media reports describing Emily Mercer always carrying a cloth doll handmade by her grandmother. Recognizing the potential importance, the crew immediately halted operations and contacted the King County Sheriff's Office. When the investigative team arrived, they quickly secured the area, establishing a broader crime scene perimeter to ensure no disturbance of the surrounding soil. Especially since the backpack's location was right at the edge of one of the side branches affected by landslides, significantly overlapping the area where the 1995 tire tracks had led before being buried. The backpack was carefully recovered using specialized gloves, placed in a dedicated evidence container, and transported immediately to the King County Forensics Lab for processing. As technicians began cleaning layers of adhered soil from the fabric, they discovered additional small fabric scraps inside the backpack, a child's button, and a rotted wool tie, all too damaged for visual identification, but the doll head was unexpectedly better preserved. Though the fabric around the face was heavily decayed, the embroidered left eye thread and a strip of pink fiber around the doll's hair were sufficient for recognition. When the evidence was shown to the Mercer family, Emily's grandmother immediately broke down in tears and confirmed it was the head of the doll she had personally sewn for her granddaughter when Emily turned 5. The most critical detail she clearly remembered using light pink embroidery thread and an off-center left eye stitch, exactly matching the found sample. Family confirmation became the key factor. This was the first evidence in nearly 2 decades directly identified as belonging to one of the 3 victims. When this information was entered into the internal report, the investigative team immediately activated the file reevaluation protocol, as Washington state law clearly requires that when new evidence directly linked to a victim emerges, the case must be transferred to the cold case unit for reassessment. In an emergency meeting on May 22, 2013, the King County Sheriff's Office commander signed the official decision to transfer the entire Mercer-Torres, Mercer Missing Persons 1995 file to the Washington State Cold Case Unit. This decision included transferring all old and new evidence, handing over 1995 crime scene notes, backing up all interview transcripts, including statements about the strange man at the gas station, and Daniel Mercer's financial conflict history with Caleb Rourke, forwarding logging road mapping, data before and after landslides, and updating information about the backpack and doll head as new evidence with actual investigative value. For the cold case unit, this was a standout case because the doll head was considered threshold-exceeding evidence, meaning it had direct identification value and potential relevance to the victim's location at the time of disappearance. The end-of-day report stated clearly, "New evidence changes file status from no new datas to authenticated evidence present. This requires the case to enter the structural event re-evaluation phase." By the end of May 2013, the Mercer disappearance case file was transferred to the Washington Cold Case Unit, and just days later, a team of seasoned investigators was assigned to take over, beginning a full reopening of all documents from 1995 to review every detail through the lens of modern cold case investigative techniques and forensic standards. Right in the first meeting, the team leader required all members to read the entire original file, including crime scene reports, forest search notes, forensic reports, evidence lists, and all witness statements. The goal was clear: restructure the disappearance case from the ground up, without assuming any prior hypotheses, without overlooking any details, and considering the possibility of investigative errors in the early days of the 1995 investigation. The review process began with the most critical starting point: the North Bend gas station, the place where the 3 victims were last seen. Nearly 20 years had passed, but the statements from the gas station remained the only anchor for reconstructing the travel route of Daniel, Emily, and Raphael before they vanished. While reviewing the records of the gas station employee's statement, investigators from the Cold Case Unit discovered an anomaly in the 1995 file. There was only a single summary of the statement, with no full original transcript. Worse, this summary slightly contradicted a second statement recorded by another officer a few days later. In the first summary, the gas station employee described the strange man as standing near pump area 3 and looking toward Daniel's truck. But in the second record, he described the man as approaching Daniel and possibly talking to him for about a minute. This was a significant difference because direct approach and mere observation are 2 completely different levels of interaction. The Cold Case Unit asked, did police in 1995 downplay the possibility that this man played a role in intervening in the 3 victims' journey? Cold case investigators also noticed an overlooked detail: the second witness, a driver of a small pickup truck present at the time, had stated that a dark green pickup left the lot almost at the same time as the Mercer hauling truck, but police at the time only recorded this description superficially, without asking the witness to sketch it, without pulling vehicle lists from the area, and without cross-referencing the statement with vehicle registration data in King County. The Cold Case Unit assessed this as a significant investigative oversight, especially in a case with an unexplained 90-minute gap that could not be accounted for by voluntary behavior. A team of investigators was tasked with re-verifying the identities of the gas station employee and the pickup driver. Despite nearly 20 years having passed, they located both individuals. Re-interviews were scheduled, but first, the Cold Case Unit needed to reconstruct the entire 1995 timeline based on documents and physical evidence. While re-examining the route data, the Cold Case Unit noted that the Mercer hauling truck was found too deep into the logging road to simply be lost. To reach NF 57 from the gas station, Daniel would have had to turn left onto NF 5510, travel a long stretch, and then enter a side branch. The Cold Case Unit raised a critical question: why would Daniel turn onto a forest road without some form of intervention? And if he was forced to turn, when did that happen? Meanwhile, the forensic file analysis team noted that most evidence collected in 1995 had not been processed according to modern DNA preservation standards, understandable at the time, but creating difficulties for reanalysis in the cold case phase. However, the discovery of the backpack and Emily's doll fragment created a new milestone. The 2013 location where the evidence was found was very close to where the 1995 tire tracks disappeared. This strongly suggested that the 3 victims had exited the vehicle in the nearby area, or at least some of Emily's items had fallen or been left there during the incident. The cold case unit assessed this as an indication that the logging road in the NF 5510 area was not just a route the vehicle passed through, but possibly the site of a critical event leading to the disappearance of all 3 victims. An investigative team was assigned to review everyone who had close contact with Daniel prior to the disappearance. This list included Mercer hauling customers, former neighbors, acquaintances at hardware stores, gas station employees, and especially Caleb Rourke. While reviewing the files related to Rourke, the cold case unit realized that the 1995 interrogation, while noting financial disputes, overlooked a key detail. Rourke's cabin was located near the area where Emily's backpack was later found in 2013. Moreover, at the time, police did not check the logging road behind the cabin because it had landslide damage just a few months after the search ended. The cold case unit assessed that, while this was not enough to consider Rourke a suspect, his residence location created an important geographic factor needing re-examination. The conflict history analysis team also noted that a 2006 statement from Daniel's former colleague describing a heated argument between Daniel and Rourke had never been investigated further. This led the cold case unit to add Rourke to the list of individuals needing re-verification of alibis. At the summary meeting at the end of June 2013, the cold case unit concluded that the 1995 file contained many deficiencies. Key witness statements were not fully recorded. Suspicious vehicle data was not traced. The strained relationship between Daniel and Rourke was not thoroughly analyzed. The possibility of the strange man's involvement at the gas station had never been deeply investigated. All these factors, combined with the new evidence, the backpack and Emily's doll fragment, compelled the cold case unit to place the case into full re-investigation status. When the Washington Cold Case Unit officially re-evaluated the entire Mercer disappearance file in the summer of 2013, one of the priority investigative directions identified immediately was re-examining the 1995 evidence in light of modern forensic technology. In particular, the forensic team focused on tiny fabric fibers collected from the edge of the driver's seat door of the Mercer hauling truck, sample-coded M95C2, which at the time was deemed unanalyzable due to being too small and too contaminated. However, by 2013, touch DNA had reached a sensitivity threshold sufficient to process microscopic samples, especially when combined with the new epithelial cell separation technique from the Washington State Forensic Lab. In early July 2013, the cold case unit transferred all trace evidence items to the laboratory in Tacoma for retesting. Technicians opened the sealed envelope from 1995, a darkened paper envelope that had yellowed over time, and placed the fibers under an electron microscope. The initial observation showed the fibers still retained their structure, though coated in old dirt and showing minor degradation from age. Notably, the sample was located on the edge of the driver's seat door, a position very close to where the driver enters and exits. Technicians proceeded with the 2013 standard cell separation process, using the double swab technique to collect any remaining cells adhered to the fibers. This process could not be applied in 1995 and was not effective enough in the 2003-2005 period, but by 2013, it had become the standard technique for cold cases. After nearly 36 hours of processing, the preliminary report showed an extremely small amount of extracted DNA, but sufficient to run STR testing. The analysis results were entered into the Washington State DNA Index system. On the morning of July 11, 2013, the cold case unit received a call from the forensic lab, a call that investigators later described as the breakthrough of the entire case. The DNA profile from sample M95C2 matched the profile of an individual whose DNA was on file due to an administrative violation in 2001, Caleb Rourke. The team immediately requested a second confirmatory test to rule out cross-contamination. The lab repeated the entire process using an independent sample separated from the remaining fiber portion. This time, results came back after about 72 hours, DNA match at all 13 standard STR loci, random match probability, 1 in 9.8 trillion. This meant that a fiber carrying Caleb Rourke's DNA had appeared inside or very near the driver's door of the Mercer hauling truck at the time of the disappearance. This was the first evidence in 18 years showing Rourke's physical presence in Daniel's vehicle, something he had completely denied during the 1995 interrogation. When the cold case unit reviewed that year's file, investigators noted that Rourke claimed he had never entered or stood near Daniel's truck, except for 2 prior deliveries, and those occurred in the Fall City area, not North Bend. In fact, Rourke had clearly stated, "I never touched Daniel's truck." But touch DNA proved otherwise. The fiber caught in the door crease could only appear if a person's clothing brushed the door edge while climbing in, stepping out, or pressing close to the vehicle body. Additionally, the fiber's location on the driver's door edge ruled out the possibility of mere casual contact during deliveries years earlier. If the fiber had fallen naturally during prior deliveries before 1995, it would not be in a position where the door edge rubs. The lab's supplemental report stated clearly, the fiber's position suggests direct and forceful contact near the time of the disappearance, not a years-old residual sample. The cold case unit immediately placed Rourke in the person of active interest category while re-evaluating all his behavior, statements, and related geographic indicators. As they pieced the information together, an alarming chain of coincidences emerged. Rourke lived near the logging road, near where tire tracks appeared, and very close to the area where Emily's backpack containing the doll fragment was found in 2013. He had a history of disputes with Daniel. No convincing alibi for the 10:30–12 o'clock timeframe on the day of the disappearance. His 1995 statements contradicted investigative findings, and now his DNA was found in a critical position in the victim's vehicle. On July 15, 2013, during an internal meeting, the cold case unit team leader declared, "We have physical evidence with a DNA match. There is no longer any reason to treat Rourke as a peripheral figure. He is immediately upgraded to primary suspect." This decision was recorded in the official file, along with a note from the lead investigator. The DNA result changes the entire foundation of the case. Rourke's presence in the truck is undeniable. The cold case unit shifted to planning next steps, re-verifying all of Rourke's movements in 1995, re-interviewing gas station witnesses, collecting financial records, phone records, and travel patterns around Rourke's cabin, and assessing whether he ever owned or borrowed an unregistered dark green vehicle, the type of vehicle a witness saw leaving the gas station right after Daniel. The 2013 Touch DNA test results did not answer all the case's questions, but they shattered 18 years of stagnation. For the first time since August 20, 1995, the investigation had an official suspect, and it was the name the North Bend community had speculated about for nearly 2 decades, but without any evidence to prove it. When the DNA from the fiber on the driver's door edge of the Mercer hauling truck matched Caleb Rourke, and he was elevated to official primary suspect, the Washington Cold Case Unit immediately expanded its review of 1995 witness statements to find additional supporting data. Among the old witness list recorded by the 1995 team, there was a name forgotten for years, an elderly hunter named Leroy Jenkins, then 63 years old, living on the outskirts of North Bend. The 1995 file note only briefly stated that he heard unusual engine noise on the logging road on the morning of August 20th, but didn't see anything clearly, and since there was no indication this statement was important, police at the time did not follow up. However, when the cold case unit reviewed it, they realized that the time Jenkins heard the noise, around nearly 11 a.m. per the old record, fell exactly into the unexplained 90-minute gap of the case. That factor alone was enough to decide to track down Jenkins, despite nearly 2 decades having passed. A team of investigators was assigned to locate him. They used local medical care records, residency lists, and hunting license records to determine that Jenkins now lived in a private nursing home in Fall City. Though 81 years old and in poor health, he remained mentally sharp, especially when discussing memories related to hunting and the Snoqualmie forest. The interview took place in the nursing home's common room, where Jenkins greeted the cold case unit with rare curiosity for an elderly witness. When investigators asked about the morning of August 20th, 1995, he furrowed his brow, closed his eyes for a few seconds, and began recalling what he had seen. He said that morning he entered the forest earlier than usual to set traps near the NF 5510 route. Around after 10:45, while standing in a thicket not far from the logging road, he heard a truck engine running slowly, as if struggling on rough terrain. This didn't stand out at the time because logging roads were used by loggers, but the next sound made him pause. A short brake squeal, then a very hard door slam. Not like someone getting out to rest, he described. What caught the cold case unit's attention most was Jenkins' next statement. I saw a figure walking along the road. I didn't see the face, but the build, it looked like Caleb Rourke. Jenkins explained that he had met Rourke a few times at a hardware store in Falls City in the early 90s, and clearly remembered his distinctive limping gait, shoulders slightly hunched forward, left leg stride longer than the right. When investigators showed him a photo of Rourke from 1994, Jenkins nodded firmly. That's the build. I'm not 100% sure, but very similar. Jenkins added that the figure he saw walk deeper into the logging road did not return to the vehicle and appeared to be carrying something in his right hand. Possibly a bag or large object, but he was too far to confirm. When asked why he didn't report this detail in 1995, he sighed. The police back then said, I probably just misheard loggers. They didn't ask more. I didn't think it mattered until I heard about that abandoned truck. The cold case unit cross-checked the location Jenkins described when comparing it to the 1995 topographic map. His statement matched perfectly with the position near the side branch where tire tracks vanished and near the area where Emily's backpack and doll fragment were later found. This made the new statement not only match the timeline, but also the location with the entire case progression. Though Jenkins did not see the man's face and could not confirm 100%, it was Rourke. The similarity in build and direction of movement held significant value in building circumstantial evidence. The cold case unit immediately added this statement to the file as a weighty supporting clue, especially since it bolstered the DNA conclusion from the 1995 fiber. In the summary report, the investigator noted clearly, Jenkins' statement, though indirect, reinforces the temporal and spatial model of Caleb Rourke's presence on the logging road between 10:40–11 a.m. on August 20, 1995. This is circumstantial evidence but meaningful when combined with forensic data. At the end of the interview, Jenkins said something that left the two investigators silent for a few seconds. I thought I should have said more back then. If I'd known it was this important, I would have reported it sooner. The statement was recorded, signed for confirmation, and added to the cold case file as one of the first key pieces of data indicating that Rourke was not only present near the logging road on the day of the disappearance, but may have been the last person seen in the area where the three victims vanished. The Washington Cold Case Unit, after obtaining the trio of breakthrough evidence, touched DNA matching Caleb Rourke, new testimony from Hunter Leroy Jenkins, and physical evidence of Emily's backpack and doll fragment discovered on Logging Road, NF 5510, began the process of reconstructing the full 24 hours before the three victims disappeared on August 20, 1995. Their goal was not only to connect the timeline milestones, but also to identify logical gaps between old and new data, using modern investigative technology to build a seamless, clear timeline, and most importantly, one that could withstand the legal requirements for an arrest warrant. The special analysis team, consisting of 3 veteran investigators and a timeline reconstruction expert, started with the 8:15 a.m. milestone when Daniel Mercer left home with his wife Emily and companion Rafael Torres. This data was confirmed by family statements and Mercer Hauling's delivery log, which clearly noted a light materials delivery to Falls City that morning. Traffic cameras in 1995 were incomplete, but the cold case unit used route maps and Daniel's driving habits to reconstruct the journey from home to North Bend. By 10:28 a.m., gas station employee testimony, combined with receipt data, confirmed the three had stopped at the North Bend Chevron. This was the last milestone where the three victims were seen publicly. During this time, two independent witnesses saw a strange man appearing around Daniel's truck, and in the second statement, which had been incompletely recorded in the 1995 files, the gas station employee reported that the stranger approached Daniel for about a minute. The cold case unit compared the witness descriptions with 1995 photos of Caleb Rourke and found a high degree of similarity in build, height, and hairstyle. Combined with the touch DNA results on the fabric fiber recovered from the driver's seat door edge, the investigative team concluded that Rourke's presence at the gas station was no longer speculative but highly substantiated. From 10:30 a.m. to noon, the 90-minute gap that had stalled the 1995 investigation. The cold case unit reconstructed the journey based on geographic data, Jenkins' testimony, and the location of evidence found in 2013. According to Jenkins, around 10:50 a.m., he heard braking and a truck door slamming hard, then saw a figure resembling Rourke walking along the logging road deeper into the forest. The cold case unit remeasured the distance from Jenkins' position to the logging road, matching the line of sight he described. Moreover, the spot where he saw the figure lay directly on the axis that the Mercer hauling truck would have to pass if forced off the main road. Combining the three pieces of evidence, DNA, witness testimony, and evidence location, the cold case unit built the following model. After leaving the gas station, Daniel drove toward Falls City as planned, but was overtaken and blocked by another vehicle near the turnoff to NF 5510. Rourke, motivated by financial grievances, and the roadblock may have been an act to threaten or force Daniel into a confrontation. When Daniel stopped, tension arose, and Rourke forced the three to turn onto the logging road to avoid being seen by others. From the road intersection to where tire tracks were discovered in 1995 was about 1.2 miles, matching the time frame the cold case unit calculated based on the truck's speed when forced deeper into the forest. After reaching the side branch, the cold case unit determined that a second confrontation likely occurred, forcing the three victims to exit the vehicle. The discovery of Emily's backpack and doll fragment near this area confirmed that at least some of their belongings were discarded or fell out during the incident. In the reconstructed model, when the three were forced out of the vehicle, the driver's door was slammed hard, explaining why the fabric fiber with Rourke's DNA was on the door edge. Afterward, according to Jenkins, a figure moved into the forest, and the cold case unit believed it was highly likely Rourke leading the three. When adding 1995 topographic map data, the cold case unit noted that the area where Jenkins saw the figure matched an elevation change point and was an ideal spot to lead people deeper into the forest without detection from the main logging road. At the summary meeting on August 2, 2013, the timeline analysis team presented their findings. The travel model, based on DNA plus witness plus physical evidence, shows Caleb Rourke's continuous presence from the gas station to the logging road. No other scenario is more reasonable. Afterward, the legal team evaluated the model against arrest warrant criteria. To meet legal standards, the cold case unit needed to prove three elements. 1. Rourke was present in the victim's vehicle during the disappearance time frame. 2. Rourke appeared near the logging road at the exact time of the disappearance. 3. Victim-related physical evidence was found at a location corresponding to where Rourke appeared. All three elements combined formed a strong legal basis. At the end of the meeting, the cold case unit leader concluded, the reconstructed timeline has no unexplained gaps. All data points to one common factor. Caleb Rourke intervened in the three victims' journey and led them into the Snoqualmie forest area. We have sufficient grounds to proceed with an arrest warrant request. This was the first time in nearly 20 years that the Mercer case file reached an actionable legal threshold, and it was the turning point before the investigation entered its public phase. After the Washington Cold Case Unit completed the reconstruction of the 24-hour disappearance day and concluded that the three key data sources, matching DNA, Hunter Jenkins' testimony, and Emily's backpack evidence, all pointed to Caleb Rourke's presence and interfering actions, the file was transferred to the King County Prosecutor's Office for evaluation of an arrest warrant request. In a closed-door meeting on August 6, 2013, investigators presented the full chain of evidence. The 2013 STR-DNA analysis results with near absolute certainty. Jenkins' testimony at the logging road perfectly matching the 90-minute gap, and the newly found evidence location lying exactly within the suspect's determined movement range. The chief prosecutor, after nearly 2 hours reviewing forensic reports and timeline analysis, declared that the probable cause standard had been strongly met. By the end of the meeting, he signed the arrest warrant for Caleb Rourke on the initial charge, kidnapping in the first degree based on the likelihood that he used force or threats to control the three victims' route. The Cold Case Unit immediately activated the Dangerous Suspect Arrest Protocol per 2013 risk classification. Records showed Rourke lived alone in an old wooden cabin on the edge of Fall City, near the logging road and completely isolated from residential areas. The house had no grid electricity, no regular visitors, and due to the surrounding steep forested terrain, approach required clear tactics. The Cold Case Unit leader requested tactical support from the King County SWAT team, describing the suspect as potentially armed, with an old grudge against the victim and prior violent behavior per 2006 witness statements. SWAT received orders to prepare overnight. At dawn on August 7, 2013, unmarked SWAT vehicles moved quietly into Fall City, stopping about a quarter-mile from Rourke's cabin to avoid engine noise echoing in the forest valley. From there they deployed on foot, carrying non-lethal weapons and specialized breaching equipment. A small drone was deployed to observe the cabin roof, recording no external movement and only one window emitting faint light from inside. When the clock hit 5:12 a.m., the SWAT commander signaled. 3 teams approached from 3 different directions to prevent the suspect from fleeing toward the rear logging road. The front team closed in on the main door while broadcasting, "Caleb Rourke. This is the King County Sheriff's Office. We have an arrest warrant. Exit the cabin with your hands up." No response. After about 10 seconds of silence, a small noise came from inside, like something being dragged across the wooden floor. SWAT broadcast a second warning, demanding Rourke exit immediately. Silence again. The SWAT commander decided to switch to forced entry. One operator used a hydraulic breaching tool, delivering a strong jolt to the rotted wooden door frame. The door flew open, and the first team rushed into the cabin. They found Rourke standing backed into a corner wall, unarmed but with a tense face. He did not resist, did not flee, and said nothing. SWAT subdued him in 5 seconds, cuffed him, and led him out of the cabin. As Rourke was walked across the damp dirt yard, SWAT flashlights illuminated his face, and face much older than the 1995 file photos, but with the same limping gait and forward slumped shoulders, exactly as described by Hunter Jenkins. The Cold Case Unit immediately took custody of the suspect, reread the Miranda rights, and loaded him into a special transport vehicle. In the arrest report, SWAT noted, "Suspect non-resistant, did not flee, no weapons possessed at time of arrest. Mental state, unstable, verbally non-cooperative." As the convoy left the Fall City forest, dawn was breaking, the first sunlight piercing through the trees along the logging road. The road once buried by landslides and secrets for nearly 20 years, now the focal point of an investigation entering a new phase. Rourke, after nearly 2 decades, as just a name in North Bend rumors, was finally arrested, and the Cold Case Unit prepared for the next step, interrogating the only suspect ever confirmed to be present at the location, time, and circumstances matching the 3 victims' disappearance. When Rourke was arrested at dawn, and the Cold Case Unit completed suspect transfer procedures to King County Detention, the information was not immediately released, but went through internal verification and official press conference preparation. However, by noon on August 7, 2013, the King County Sheriff's Office issued a brief statement to the press. An individual has been arrested in connection with the 1995 Mercer disappearance. That alone was enough for local social media and North Bend, Fall City, and Snoqualmie Valley forums to explode. Within less than an hour, the name Caleb Rourke leaked from an anonymous source in the local fire department, and the story spread so fast that many residents knew the identity before the press conference. By the 2 p.m. press conference, when the cold case unit representative confirmed the arrested person was indeed Caleb Rourke, shock rippled through the entire Snoqualmie Valley community like a jolt to deep-seated memories. Dozens of older residents recalled that Rourke had appeared in one of the 1995 volunteer search groups when local forces mobilized civilians to scour the forest around the logging road. Some said they had seen him standing near the search staging area, silently looking at maps without joining discussions. Others remembered him present on the first day search teams formed lines along NF 5510, when everyone still thought the 3 victims might be lost due to an accident. This made the community even more shocked, the image of someone who had appeared among the searchers, now arrested, as the suspected person who led the 3 victims into the forest. On 2013 North Bend social media forums, which were already widespread and fast-spreading, some residents reposted their memories. I clearly remember him standing outside the search group, silent, not holding a map, not asking questions. I thought he was just a passerby. Another wrote, in hindsight, he always stood apart, like he was observing everyone. Local TV news stations formed special teams, heading to North Bend to interview residents. Many expressed disbelief that someone who lived quietly for nearly 20 years could be linked to the disappearance the whole town never forgot. Cairo 7 reporters captured clear community reactions divided into 2 groups: those who believed everyone knew Rourke had issues, and those completely surprised because he seemed harmless, lived alone, never bothered anyone. But the most shocking part was the reaction from the 2 families, the Mercer family and the Torres family. They had lived nearly 2 decades with unresolved pain, no closure, just lingering questions haunting their homes at night. When media gathered outside their homes, they were forced to step out and face dozens of rapid-fire questions. Daniel's father, now in his 70s, stood at the wooden door, voice trembling but clear. "We have waited nearly 20 years. If this is the first step to knowing what happened to our son, to Emily and Raphael, we will fully cooperate. But please, give the family private space." In Fall City, the Raphael Torres family also faced media lining both sides of the road. Raphael's sister, now grown, spoke through tears. "We never gave up hope, but we never thought someone would be arrested. I don't know whether to be happy or scared. We just want the truth." The event was so shocking that many North Bend residents gathered outside Town Hall that evening for informal discussions about the arrest. Many said they felt betrayed because someone who lived among them, appeared in community searches, was now suspected of causing tragedy for 3 families. Others expressed cautious relief. If the DNA technology says it's true, at least we're not standing still anymore. Part of the community shock came from the cold case unit, revealing at the press conference that the fabric fiber with Rourke's DNA had been collected from the truck in 1995, but only analyzable in 2013, due to technology advances. This led many to ask, if technology had advanced sooner, would we have known the truth long ago? Articles in the Seattle Times and KOMO News quoted forensic experts saying this case was a classic example of cold cases solved after decades due to technological progress, not prior police lack of effort. In the hours after the arrest announcement, the families were overwhelmed. Calls from relatives, media, old acquaintances, and victim support organizations. Some reporters even tried contacting those who lived near Rourke to ask about his behavior over the 20 years. Cold case investigators, understanding the sensitivity of the arrest, sent victim support teams to both families to help them cope with the media explosion. On the night of August 7, 2013, North Bend was immersed in a state of both shock and excitement. For the first time in nearly 2 decades, they felt the darkness over the disappearance might, even slightly, begin to lift. But along with that hope came a sense of imbalance. The biggest question remained unanswered, and the community knew the arrest was only the start of a truth that could be far more painful. In the King County Sheriff's Office interrogation room, Caleb Rourke was brought into a brightly lit room with gray walls, a metal table, and 2 cold case unit investigators. Lieutenant Morgan and Detective Hale, sitting across from him, thick files in front of them. Since his arrest, Rourke had been completely silent, no resistance, no questions, no immediate lawyer request, just staring down at the table with weary eyes, as if he had been carrying something heavy for nearly 20 years. Morgan began the interrogation by presenting each piece of evidence one by one in an even, non-pressuring tone, the 2013 touch DNA analysis. Photos of the fiber location on the truck door edge, the STR report confirming Rourke's DNA match at all 13 loci. Leroy Jenkins' testimony describing the distinctive gait figure appearing exactly in the 90-minute gap. And finally, the photo of Emily's rotted backpack and confirmed doll fragment from her grandmother. Rourke listened to it all without looking up, fingers trembling irregularly. Hale pushed the backpack photo closer, gently but deliberately. "You know where this was, right?" Rourke remained silent, but the first reaction appeared. His face briefly winced, as if an old wound had been scratched. Morgan continued, "We're not asking if you were involved. The DNA already answered that. We just need to know where the 3 of them are." A long silence followed, only the steady hum of the air conditioning. Rourke began breathing heavier, as if the room's air had thickened, forcing him to struggle to swallow something. When Hale placed another photo, the Mercer hauling truck found at NF 57, intact but empty, in front of him, Rourke finally spoke. "I didn't mean for it to happen like that." His voice was hoarse, weak, and broken. Morgan did not interrupt, just nodded lightly to keep him talking. Rourke covered his face with both hands, then pulled them down, revealing an expression mixing self-loathing and exhaustion. "I ran into him, Daniel, at the gas station. I wanted to talk to him, just talk." Hale asked, "About the money owed?" Rourke nodded, the first time looking directly at the 2 investigators. "He owed me, or I thought so. Back then I couldn't control myself anymore." Morgan gently, "You followed them out of the gas station?" A deep sigh escaped, like surrender. "I followed. I wanted him to stop, so we could settle it. But he didn't stop. I blocked him. I made him turn into the forest road." Hale did not push, just took notes, and left space for him to continue. Rourke clenched his hands until they went white. "I didn't think it would go that far. There was a kid in the truck, and the other guy with them." He said kid, and the other guy with a tone heavy as stone. Rourke inhaled, eyes staring down at the table, as if seeing through the metal. "I took them deeper, to near the side branch. I just wanted to scare Daniel. That's all. But everything got out of hand." Morgan did not ask for details, did not probe specific events, focusing only on the interrogation's goal. "Caleb, the only thing we need now is for you to take us to where they are resting, their location. We want to give their families answers." Rourke shuddered violently, eyes red, lips pressed tight, as if holding a final shell. But that shell had cracked the moment he saw the doll fragment photo. I didn't mean." He repeated that 3 times, hands on his head, body slightly hunched forward. Morgan kept his voice calm. "We can't turn back time, but you can end 18 years of waiting for their families." A long silence. Rourke bit his lip until it bled, then fully surrendered, saying very quietly but clearly, "I know the place. I'll take you there." Morgan immediately confirmed, "You're agreeing to lead the way." Rourke nodded, the first time looking straight at both with empty eyes, as if in that moment, the weight of nearly 2 decades had finally crushed all resistance. "There's a turnoff, after the point where the logging road was blocked in 1996. "They're there, all of them." Hale stood up, calling the cold case unit command team. Morgan recorded Rourke's confirmation into the recorder. Suspect Caleb Rourke agrees to indicate the location where the 3 victims are buried. As the door opened and the investigative team entered, Rourke sat still. No resistance, no requests, no evasion. He just closed his eyes, like someone finally admitting something he should have said long ago. The cold case unit immediately moved to the next phase, not further confrontation, but to the place no one had reached in 18 years. In less than 4 hours after Rourke admitted his involvement and agreed to lead the way, the Washington Cold Case Unit, coordinating with the field forensics team, the U.S. Forest Service geologist, and King County's intensive search team, brought the suspect back to the Snoqualmie Forest area, where logging road NF 5510 had been buried by a landslide in 1996, and where nearly 20 years earlier, the entire search had been forced to halt due to the buried terrain. Rourke was handcuffed but not hooded, standing between 2 investigators as the unmarked convoy advanced into the forest. Upon reaching the partially restored section of the logging road, reopened in 2013, Rourke pointed toward a small side branch, now overgrown with brush, saying in a hoarse voice, "Not there, go deeper," to where it slid down before. He gave fragmented but strangely precise directions, as if the memory of this road had never left his mind. The geologist team confirmed that the area Rourke described was the slope that had slid in the winter of 1996, where earth and rock had poured down, completely covering the old road surface and creating a layer 1 to 3 meters thick. That location was about 200 meters from where Emily's backpack was found, matching the area the cold case unit had suspected, but never been able to access. As the search team began clearing the thick brush, revealing the compacted ground hardened over time, Rourke pointed to a spot about 15 meters from the logging road, right below the rock outcrop that had collapsed in 1996. Down there, immediately, the forensics team sealed off the area per protocol, setting up a semicircular barricade, pulling out old 3D terrain maps, and establishing excavation coordinates. The engineers determined the soil layer was stable enough for localized digging, but required the rescue team to prepare anti-collapse equipment due to the abundance of sharp rock fragments still in the ground. When the first shovels went into the dry surface soil, just 20 minutes later, the forensics team uncovered a second layer, moist, darker, and inconsistent with the natural strata. It was the classic sign of a grave compressed over time. The forensics lead ordered a switch to delicate excavation tools, metal trowels, soft bristle brushes, and fine scraping instruments. Layer by layer, the soil was carefully removed, bit by bit, to avoid damaging anything below. At around 50 centimeters deep, one of the technicians suddenly stopped and raised a hand signal. Emerging beneath the soil was a discolored piece of fabric, resembling the remnants of a child's decayed fleece jacket. When gently cleaned with a brush, the remaining metal zipper was revealed, rusted but still identifiable. Morgan leaned down, recognizing it as very likely Emily's jacket, the light purple fleece type described by the family in the 1995 report. The forensics team continued expanding the excavation in an elliptical pattern. Just minutes later, adult arm bones began to appear. In that moment, the entire area fell silent, with only the sound of falling dirt and the tense breathing of the investigators. Over the next 3 hours, the excavation team worked non-stop, strictly adhering to preservation protocols. They located the first adult body at about 80 centimeters deep. Based on bone size and proportions, the anthropology team immediately estimated it was Daniel Mercer. Less than a meter away, in the lower collapsed soil section, they found the second adult body, most likely Rafael Torres, due to the slightly smaller skeletal frame and evidence of a healed old arm fracture, matching Rafael's medical records. But the most shocking discovery came from the left side, where the soil was noticeably softer. As the forensics team gently brushed away layers, they uncovered small ribs, then a child's skull with the facial structure still intact. The purple fleece and a rotted doll fragment lay just centimeters away. No doubt remained. These were the remains of Emily Mercer. Items found with the bodies included remnants of a child restraint strap, a star-shaped button, and a small piece of backpack, matching the color and material of the backpack found in 2013. Like the final piece of an 18-year puzzle, the alignment between the body locations and the evidence sites left the entire investigative team standing in silence for several seconds. A heavy feeling mixed with the painful relief that they had finally found the 3 victims. After complete excavation, each set of remains was placed in separate forensic bags, labeled with identification codes, and transported to the King County Medical Examiner's office for DNA identification, dental records comparison, and anthropological cross-verification. Simultaneously, the accompanying items, the button, fabric pieces, zipper, backpack fragment, and part of a decayed toy, were sealed into evidence boxes. M. 2013-40, 1 through M. 2013-47. The scene documentation team completed detailed hand-drawn reports, noting the grave structure, layer depths, orientation of each body, and estimated burial time, matching Rourke's statement about a spot near the logging road where the ground was soft and no one would find it. As the afternoon sun shone down on logging road NF 5510, the investigative team packed up the scene, carrying 3 forensic bags, 3 answers that families had waited nearly 2 decades for. On the forest road that had once swallowed traces of a family, the truth had finally been unearthed from the layer of earth and rock that seemed to hide everything forever. The trial of Caleb Rourke officially opened at King County Superior Court in February 2014, drawing media attention across Washington state, as it was the resolution of one of the most persistent cold cases in the Snoqualmie Valley. In the first 2 weeks, the prosecutor presented what was described as a perfectly interlocking chain of evidence, starting with the 2013 touch DNA results, the most compelling evidence and the reason the entire case was reopened. The prosecutor showed the jury the STR analysis model, the chart of 13 loci perfectly matching Rourke's DNA from the state database, and photos of the fabric fiber lodged at the edge of the driver's seat in the Mercer hauling truck. The forensic expert confirmed a random match probability of less than 1 in 9.8 trillion, making the chance that the DNA did not belong to Rourke virtually 0. Next, the prosecutor introduced the witness testimony of Hunter Leroy Jenkins, who described seeing a man with a gait matching Rourke's walking along the logging road at the exact time the 3 victims disappeared, and the location he saw perfectly matched the area where Emily's backpack and the mass grave were later found. Jenkins, appearing in court with a slow gait and trembling voice, still firmly affirmed what he had seen on the morning of August 20, 1995. The prosecutor continued with the evidence excavated in 2013, the decayed backpack, Emily's doll head, the child button, and the skeletons of the 3 victims with excavation site diagrams, soil layer depths, and grave structure. 3D scene photos were projected for the jury, showing the direct connection between the evidence, body locations, and Rourke's statements during interrogation. The anthropology expert confirmed victim identities via DNA, dental records, and bone ratios, reinforcing the seamless chain of events. When the prosecutor played the interrogation video in which Rourke admitted blocking the vehicle, forcing the 3 deeper into the logging road, and not being able to control what happened, the entire courtroom fell dead silent. Rourke's defense attorney attempted to mitigate by arguing that the confession was made in a state of mental exhaustion and that Rourke never directly admitted causing death, only describing loss of control. But the prosecutor countered by quoting verbatim Rourke's words, "I took them deeper. I just wanted to scare Daniel." But things got out of hand, combined with evidence of the deliberate grave and 3 bodies buried in the same soil structure, proving the actions could not be random or accidental. The defense further argued there were no direct witnesses to Rourke causing death, trying to shift the charges to lesser offenses like manslaughter. However, the prosecutor used the entire evidence chain to prove the elements of leading, controlling movement, and intentionally taking victims to an isolated area fully met the standards for kidnapping in the first degree and aggravated murder. They emphasized that burying 3 people in a deep grave was a clear act of concealment, eliminating the defense's accident argument. On the final day of closing arguments, the prosecutor ended with a statement that made many jurors bow their heads. If there was no intent to harm, why were 3 human beings found under layers of earth and rock, and why did he never report it to police for 18 years? The defense tried a counter by emphasizing Rourke's age, declining health, and arguing he no longer poses a danger to society, but the court reacted coolly, as this was not a hearing to determine danger level, but to establish guilt. When arguments concluded, the jury was sent to deliberate. They took copies of the evidence, DNA charts, excavation site diagrams, fiber photos, the confession video, and Jenkins' recorded testimony. Over 8 hours of deliberation, they reviewed all key points. Rourke's DNA presence in the victim's truck, confession to blocking the road, witness testimony of his presence on the logging road, Emily's evidence confirming the location Rourke led the team deeper into the forest, and the grave dug in a place only he knew. Near 10 p.m., the jury sent word they had reached a final verdict. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavy as they entered, the victim's family section holding hands in silence. The judge asked the jury to announce the verdict, and the 4 persons stood, holding the decision sheet, reading slowly and firmly. On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, guilty. On the charge of aggravated murder, guilty. Sobs broke out from the family section, while Rourke sat motionless, staring down at his trembling hands. The courtroom sank into heavy silence as the judge announced sentencing would continue the next day, closing one of the most anticipated trials in King County in years. On the morning of sentencing, the King County Superior Court courtroom was packed, mostly with residents of North Bend and Falls City, who had come to witness the conclusion of a case that had hung over their community for nearly 2 decades. When Judge Caldwell entered, the atmosphere became so quiet that the turning of each page in the files could be heard. After reviewing all recommendations from the prosecutor, prior record documents, witness statements, and the particularly severe nature of concealing 3 bodies, the court announced the final sentence for Caleb Rourke, 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The sentence rang out clearly in the courtroom, like closing the final door on a long dark chapter, while restoring the sense of justice that 3 families had lost for 18 years. When the gavel struck, Emily's mother broke into sobs, held tightly by relatives. Daniel's father, eyes red and voice shaking, said only one sentence: "Finally, my son and granddaughter have heard the truth." Rafael Torres's family stood silently, hands clasped tightly, holding on to what remained after a long, painful journey. In the days following the sentence announcement, the Snoqualmie Valley community, from North Bend to Falls City, held a joint memorial service in the town square, where 3 small plaques engraved with the names of Daniel, Emily, and Raphael were placed under the flagpole, with candles lit throughout the night. The service was not just for the victims' families, but for the entire town, as a way to lift the fear, suspicion, and lingering questions that had haunted them for so long. Many who had joined the 1995 search teams appeared, standing close together in silence, looking back at the forest road they once believed held answers, but did not know the solution, lay deep under the landslide-covered earth. At a town meeting a week later, the North Bend Council unanimously approved renaming the section of logging road NF 5510, where the truck was abandoned and the grave discovered, to Mercer Memorial Route. The renaming was not to erase painful memories, but to commemorate the nearly 2-decade search and honor the 3 lives lost. The new sign was erected in late summer 2014, right near the turnoff to the logging road, as a reminder that the place that once swallowed truth had become a symbol of community unity, perseverance, and restored justice. Many residents said for the first time they felt the road was no longer as frightening as before, no longer a blank spot on the map of memory, but a place they could visit to light candles, leave flowers, and maintain a connection with the three victims. The impact of the case did not stop at the verdict or the new road sign. It spread through many layers of community life. Mount Si High School incorporated the story into its sociology curriculum, emphasizing the role of DNA technology in solving cold cases. Many students participated in forensic research projects, using this very case as an example of the importance of long-term evidence preservation. Business owners in North Bend shared that they felt their town was safer after the perpetrator of the disappearance was brought to justice. The mutual suspicion that had simmered for years finally settled. However, the deepest impact lay in the prolonged sense of loss that had shaped the Falls City and North Bend communities for nearly 2 decades. Those living near Rourke's old cabin said they had to learn to separate memories of a solitary man from the horrific truth confirmed by the court. Many longtime residents shared feelings of guilt for once thinking the disappearance might have been just an accident or voluntary leaving, while the truth lay hidden under forest soil right near places they passed daily. The victims' families received special support from counseling organizations after the bodies were found and the case concluded. They held separate funerals for each person, a ritual they had waited nearly half their lives for, and attendance was so high that the cemetery had to expand parking for 2 weeks. When the final articles about the trial were published, many local papers called it the most necessary closure for an overly long tragedy. But for the victims' families and North Bend residents, the story did not fully close. It became part of the small mountain town's urban history, a memory passed down as a reminder of what can be buried deep in the forest and what a community can achieve when it does not give up. By the end of 2014, Mercer Memorial Route became a place people visited to jog, hike, or simply stop to look into the forest and remember the 3 victims. And in the very silence of that Snoqualmie forest, the community found what they had lost long ago, the feeling that truth, however late, however painful, ultimately prevails. The story of the disappearance and the 18-year journey to justice for Daniel Mercer, Emily Mercer, and Rafael Torres clearly reflects a truth that remains relevant in American life today. Violence in small communities can smolder beneath an appearance of normalcy. Small initial investigative errors can prolong pain for decades. And modern forensic technology can become the key to breaking seemingly permanent deadlocks. The fact that Caleb Rourke participated in the 1995 community search, right among people trying to find the 3 victims he himself had taken into the forest, is a powerful reminder that perpetrators sometimes do not fit the dangerous image we imagine. In a society still facing missing persons cases and domestic violence, we must be cautious but not paranoid. The important thing is to place trust wisely and not ignore unusual signs, no matter how small. Additionally, the initial error in recording the 1995 gas station witness statement demonstrates that law enforcement systems need investment, not just in technology, but in human training. A single missing record caused the case to stall for nearly 2 decades. Today, with advancements in security cameras, GPS, data analysis, and standardized witness recording, this story reminds us they must be used seriously, consistently, and uniformly. The story also speaks to the enduring strength of family and community. The people of North Bend never forgot the 3 victims despite years of hopelessness. In modern America, where fast-paced life can make people overlook others' pain, this perseverance and community responsibility is a lesson not to be lost. Finally, the emergence of touch DNA in 2013, solving a case thought to be permanently silent, is proof that scientific progress not only serves convenience, but can deliver justice. This encourages us to support forensic improvement programs, cold case funds, and dedicated investigative units, because sometimes justice does not come quickly, but it can still arrive if society does not give up. Thank you for following to the end of this nearly 2-decade journey for justice. If the story touched you, please subscribe so you don't miss the next cases. See you in the next video, where we continue to uncover buried truths and voices that deserve to be heard.